In this video, you will learn all you need to know about business analyst roles and responsibilities in just 5 minutes. Let's jump right into the content. Before we answer the question which roles there are and responsibilities, let's for now answer the first question: what is business analysis? Based on the business analysis body of knowledge by the IIBA, business analysis is the practice of enabling change in an enterprise by defining needs and recommending solutions that deliver value to stakeholders. That's the basic definition of business analysis. So a super easy example would be, let's say, okay, there is a heavy rain outside and you don't want to become wet when you go outside. So that's the need, right? You don't want to become wet. You want to stay dry. And the idea is, okay, which change do we need to do and which solutions can we recommend to fulfill this need? And one solution could be the umbrella or the raincoat. And with this, we have basically identified a need, and by recommending a solution, we have enabled the change so the need is fulfilled. That's a very practical and easy example to understand what this really means, this definition. But now let's jump a bit more into business analysis in organizations. So I'm just drawing up a chart now, a diagram. Basically, every organization these days mainly consists of a business side and an IT side. And for example, in the business side on the very left, you have the business users, so people who are using your applications to generate money. For example, for insurances, this could be the salesperson who's on the very left, who's bringing in the money, so the user of your application. On the other side, on the right spectrum, you will have people in IT, like people who are focused on the hardware or infrastructure, or software developers who are coding in Java, C, or whatever language. These are the two extremes. And now we have a beautiful midfield in between these two extremes, which is the business analysis spectrum. The business analysis body of knowledge book, as I have mentioned before, is describing different roles which are basically acting as business analysts. For example, the systems analyst, process analyst, and the product owner, and many more. I have drawn these roles also into this diagram here. As you can see on the right hand side, the systems analyst and the process analyst or process modeler is more IT related, and roles which are more on the IT side, most often in job descriptions, are called IT business analyst or requirements engineer. Maybe you have seen this different job title in job descriptions before. And mainly what people on the IT side are doing is they are translating requirements into IT language, or basically how do we need things. On the other side, on the left side, these roles, which are on this side of the spectrum, are mainly called business analysts, the traditional wording of business analysts. And one example here could be a product owner. So now it depends on the product you're owning. If it's a very technical product, then maybe the product owner role could shift more towards the right side of the spectrum. But mainly if you have a product which is for users who are making the sales, something like this with a graphical user interface, the product owner role is more something like this here on the left side of the spectrum. And what is the task for business analysts on the left side? Here it is all about talking to end users, gathering the needs, having more of a business focus, and they're not using IT terms yet because they're just talking to the stakeholders, talking to the people. And the questions here, the main ones are, what do we need and why do we need it? Do we really need it? So now, after understanding which roles are there for business analysts, I want to talk about more the concrete responsibilities of these roles. Like I've mentioned at the beginning, per definition, the responsibility of business analysts is to define needs and to provide solutions. And now let's compare these responsibilities for two concrete roles for the product owner and the systems analyst. The product owner, as you might know in the agile methodology, is more focused on the users and is therefore interested in gathering needs in user requirement form, right? So the product owner would write his user stories and define the needs the user has. Also, the product owner is shaping a little bit the solution by providing acceptance criteria. Then on the other hand, we have the systems analyst who's not that much into users, but more into systems, and hence therefore also more into system requirements. The system analyst wants to figure out, okay, what is the need of the systems so that the user requirements, which is coming from the product owner, can be implemented, right? So if there's a change from the user, how do the systems have to behave after this? Which systems have to change in which way? That's the focus of the system analyst. So he's defining the needs for the systems and providing a solution there. So as you can see, system analysts and product owners both are business analysts because they are both defining needs and do provide solutions.
What are the most important key skills every business analyst should possess? In this video, I'm going to talk about the key skills you must have in 2021. Let's jump right into it. The very first key skill every BA must have is the skill set of a translator. Let me explain you this one. Originally, in your company, we have two sides. The first side is the business side. This side is making the sales, managing the customers, and is using IT applications to do the business more efficiently. Then we have the other side, the IT department, where applications are developed. Both sides speak different languages. The business side has a more business approach to the language, and the IT department is more into techie stuff. They may say the same, but mean different things. That's the reason why business representatives and software developers in general don't communicate efficiently. And that's exactly the point where you, as a business analyst, come into play. As a translator between business and IT, the business analyst needs the skill to speak both languages in order to bridge the gap between these two parties. In order to understand the real business need, and in order to enable the software developers to build an application that brings value to the business, it's key to be a good translator. Have you ever acted as a translator in such a scenario? Let me know in the comments below. The next key skill, besides being a good translator, is the skill set of a good detective. With this skill, it is key for the business analyst to ask the right questions in order to understand the stakeholders better. With the right questions, we can expose the real need behind the stakeholder requests and can avoid implementing unnecessary topics. So we also can avoid scope creep, things we don't really need. With focusing on the important things, we as detective can make sure we go in the right direction. We make flaws and dependencies visible, and we ensure transparency. The third skill every business analyst must have is the skill set of a good engineer. Like I've said in the beginning, it's not only about the business side, it's also about the IT department. We have to be able to express the requirements in detail and in IT language. So we have to build models, use diagrams, and so on in order to engineer precisely what's needed. Plain text is not enough. We have to engineer the requirements. For engineering purposes, we as business analysts have the chance of using use case diagrams, class diagrams, process models, and many, many more. Also, let me know in the comments which kind of diagrams and models you are using. The fourth key skill I want to mention in this session is the skill set of being a good politician. Let me explain this one. In the discussions with various stakeholders, you will find dependencies, discrepancies, and conflicts. And it's your job to bring the people on the same page and in negotiating what's really important between your stakeholders. You have to survive all the threats in the meeting and make sure that we can achieve the goal. That's basically how politicians try to do their job. Every business analyst has strengths and weaknesses. I'm curious to know which of these kind of like key skill sets is your strength and which one is your weakness. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.
Do we want to know the top 3 soft skills every business analyst must know because they are in high demand based on actual market research on LinkedIn? Then this video is exactly for you. Let's get started right away. The first key skill you must master is the skill of comprehension and adaptability. What do I mean with this? The question is, are you able to gain knowledge quickly? Very often as a business analyst, when you're changing your jobs, let's say for now you're in the auto industry, but you're changing to the financial sector, you have a completely different context and completely different environment. And it's crucial for you to get into the business knowledge as soon and as quick as possible. Another valid scenario is you're not changing companies, but you're changing projects, or let's say you're changing the departments. So for now you have a project in compliance IT and you're changing to asset management IT. And now you also again have different stakeholders who are talking in a different business language and you need to get the knowledge quickly. And also, are you able to adapt? These changes to new stakeholders, new contexts, new environments are super complex. and you need to be able to adapt quickly to thrive in such a role as a business analyst. Good business analysts of high value and of high demand are able to get things quickly and adapt accordingly to their environments. The second key skill I want to show you is problem solving and analytical skills. Are you able to break down problems? The business analyst has to see or get the as-is state and also the target state, and in between implementing actions to solve the problem. Are you able to analyze data, patterns, root causes, or business processes? Good business analysts master the skill of problem solving because that's the core of their work. Business analysts are there to enable change to solve problems. Regarding problem solving, I've already created a couple of videos on this channel. I will link them down below, so please make sure to watch them too. The third key skill I want to mention or highlight in this video is the communication skill. Are you able to communicate across various stakeholders and levels of understanding and seniority? You can imagine in your project, you will have various stakeholders like a business stakeholder, engineers, like software developers, or from legal, a compliance officer. The question is always, can you convince your stakeholders from the proposed solution you might have worked on? As a business analyst, you will frequently work on solution designs, and you have to bring those stakeholders together and convince them of the value of your proposal. Also, are you able to settle disputes? You will have workshops with these stakeholders, discussions will come up, and guess what? You will have to settle disputes in order to progress in the workshop, to progress in the project. So are you also able to do this? So all in all, good business analysts are mastering the three key skills of communication, comprehension, and problem solving. How good are you in these skills? Let me know in the comments below.
In this video, I'm going to show you a unique root cause analysis technique so that you are able to solve a variety of problems with only 6 steps. Complex problems in life, in school, in the workplace, or anywhere else. It doesn't matter. Furthermore than just analyzing the root cause, I want to show you problem-solving techniques you won't find in another video. While explaining the problem-solving techniques and the root cause analysis, I will showcase each step with an example. Sounds interesting to you? Then make sure to watch this video until the end. Step 1. I've read multiple books about problem solving. The one thing they all have in common is the first step: understanding the real problem. A well-defined problem is a problem half solved. What do I mean with understanding the real problem? Imagine the following scenario. One evening, you and your friend are meeting at your house. As he arrives 30 minutes late, the first thing he does in front of you is complaining about the bad parking and traffic situation in your city. You need more parking lots, he says. As he knows about your great root cause analysis and problem-solving skills, he asks you how you would solve this problem. What would be your reaction here? Maybe something like, yes, we need more parking lots, maybe an underground car park. But is the real problem really missing parking lots? The first reaction of a good problem solver is not this kind of an answer. It's a question. Simply, why? Why do we need more parking lots? Your friend would probably answer, because the streets are blocked with cars and the roads are too busy. With simply asking why, you identified the real problem. The problem statement of your friend was too narrow. It implied that the problem is that you have missing parking lots in the city, and therefore the solution would be simply more parking lots. With the why, we broadened the horizon and brought this problem one level higher. By being too narrow, we exclude a whole bunch of possible root causes. Why should we increase parking lots instead of decreasing the amount of cars in the city? By finding the real problem, we can find the real root cause. Be as broad as possible and as narrow as necessary. Step 2. After understanding the real problem, we are able to classify the problem. Which kind of problem are we facing? We can categorize problems in the following 4 buckets: simplistic, deterministic, random, and indeterminate. Simplistic problems are problems with only one answer. They are basically easy to Google, like who is the current president of the United States. Deterministic problems also only have one right answer, but there is a formula involved which needs to be used correctly. For example, what is the area of a square whose side is 2 feet? Random problems describe problems where multiple answers are possible and all answers are identified. Also, not only facts are relevant, judgments plays an important role. For example, deciding between 2 colleges or 2 job offers. Indeterminate problems are problems with multiple possible answers
and all answers cannot be identified. This problem needs a lot of judgment from the problem solver. For example, how can we increase the profit of a company? In this video, I want to dive deeper into type 4, indeterminate, the most complex problems. Step 3. In this case of these complex problems, the next step is to identify the components and influence factors of the problem. For this, we are going to use the logic tree. A logic tree is separating a problem into several parts. The tree starts at the root, and when we define it over and over again, we will get to the leaves, possible root causes. So, how do we identify the components which influence the problem? This happens by divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is a creative process. Here we generate ideas, also bold and chaotic ideas. Don't evaluate your ideas now. Just think and write them down, whatever comes to mind. Let's take the parking lot example. The problem was that the streets are fully packed with cars and there are no free available parking lots. When I try to think divergently, so creative in a broadening sense, in my mind I have the following components within our problem. We have place to park, so parking lots, and on the other side we have vehicles, cars. Let's further refine each branch. Which subcomponents are part of parking lots? What about the size of a parking lot? Or the amount of parking lots? Or also the width of the streets? Because cars can also park on the side of a street, just to name a few here. And what comes to mind when thinking about vehicles? Maybe the size? Or also the amount of cars? That's good for now. I mean, this example is just for demonstration purposes. When we cannot refine a branch even more, or we think it does not make any sense, then we have come to a leaf, a possible root cause. Step 4. Formulate hypotheses and prioritize them. The next step is to build hypotheses around the leaves of our logic tree. A hypothesis is basically an assumption for an argument. We can never show that a hypothesis is true, but we can try to find evidence which is inconsistent with the hypothesis and therefore proves it wrong. We assume a hypothesis is true as long as we don't have evidence which is inconsistent with a certain hypothesis. Based on the leaves in the logic tree, we could formulate the following hypotheses. An example, hypothesis 1. The amount of vehicles in the city increased in the last 12 months over 10%. Now you can imagine we can formulate a hypothesis for every potential root cause, even multiple hypotheses for a single root cause. We can also prioritize hypotheses over another, because the probability for each might be completely different, and maybe one makes more sense than another. As per the Pareto or 80-20 principle, 20% of the possible root causes will lead to 80% of the symptoms. Step 5. Now gather data and evidences which might be relevant for each hypothesis. Data gathering could be asking people around you, looking up for available data in the internet, which might have valuable information for your case. Start with the high priority hypothesis first. For this, we will use a hypothesis evidence matrix. Evidences in the first column, and in the other columns we enter our hypothesis. Based on this matrix, we want to find the hypothesis which is the least inconsistent with all the evidence. Every single time we gather new evidence, we will enter a new row and compare if any hypothesis is inconsistent with this evidence, meaning that the hypothesis might be wrong. When our evidence shows that the identified root cause has an immense effect, we made huge progress in our root cause analysis. Let's assume we found data that shows that in the last 12 months, many new vehicles were registered in the city. Maybe because new jobs were created, or there was another event which triggered an immigration into the city. Step 6. Identify action items and an action plan on what needs to be done in order to tweak around the root cause so the overall problem gets resolved. We assume that the amount of vehicles increased dramatically and therefore we have an issue with free parking lots in the city. Now it's time to propose a solution. The hardest part is always actually finding the root cause, not the solution. What could be a potential solution here? How can we decrease the amount of cars? What about taxes or other monetary policies to make a car less attractive? Or investing into the infrastructure, so public transport or roads explicitly for bikes to make the city also more green? It's up to you here. After identifying your solution, create an action plan. Which tasks do we have to tackle in order to come closer to our goal and therefore for solving our problem? Write down what needs to be done by when, and also who is taking responsibility here. That's how you come closer to your goal. That's a potential way of root cause analysis and on how to solve a problem. Do you want to know how to make better decisions? For example, deciding between multiple solutions? Or do you want more case studies for real-world problems? Other sophisticated problem-solving techniques or root cause analysis approaches? Let me know in the comment section below. Also consider liking and subscribing if you don't want to miss out more of this content. Thanks for watching and take care.
Are you facing a problem that you want to solve by using the 5 whys root cause analysis technique? Or have you used this technique already but you couldn't solve your problem? Then you should make sure to watch this video until the end, because I will tell you what you are probably doing wrong and how to use the 5 whys the right way. Let's jump right into the content. First, let me show you the structure of this video. The first point I want to address is what the 5 whys in general is. Then I want to show you what most people are doing wrong while using the 5 whys with a practical example. And in the end, I want to show you what you could do instead in order to solve the problems efficiently and to fix the problems of the 5 whys. So what is the 5 whys technique? The 5 whys is a technique to identify root causes of a problem. Why do we use such techniques? Well, in order to solve a problem, we need to identify the root causes first and then tackle them. Without finding the root cause, we are only fighting against the symptoms of the problem. Without fixing the root cause, the problem will occur once in a while again. After clarifying what the 5 whys root cause analysis is, let's jump on how people use it. Now I will show you the generic steps and afterwards we will do an example together. So the first step is people who use the 5 whys formulate the problem statement. Then they question it 5 times with a why. And after the 5th time, people think they have identified the root cause. So let's use this technique with an example. Let's use the example of being late for work. So the problem statement is you are late for work. Now you ask yourself, why are you late for work? One possible answer is you woke up late. Now you ask again why. And the answer could be the alarm clock didn't ring. Why didn't it ring? Because the alarm was not set. Why wasn't it set? Because you forgot to set it. Now the question, why did you forget that? And the answer is, maybe you were just too tired in the evening. This is how most people use the 5 whys. It's a linear process for them. This might work, but to be honest, this approach is full of flaws. Let me show you why. People forget that for every why, there is not only one answer. We are moving only in a biased direction. That's why we only identify one root cause, which in the end probably is not the right one or not the only one. We have to think broader than that. After every why, don't be happy with one result. Think more broadly. In order to enable divergent thinking, so thinking more broadly, we have to use the logic tree. In another video, I explained a root cause analysis technique based on the logic tree in detail. If you want to gain an in-depth knowledge, please make sure to watch it too. Otherwise, I will explain it briefly in this video. Now, I will show you how to use the 5 whys effectively with a logic tree. Let's take our late for work problem. The first step is to frame the problem. When I say frame, let's take a picture of the problem itself. Here you can see basically your way to work. What are the components we could structure our problem? So I see there is a street, there is you as a component and also your vehicle, and also other traffic participants. Let's build the logic tree based on our observations. We will have one branch per component. So your vehicle, the road, other participants, and you. Now we can refine each branch with asking why could this component be the root cause? For your vehicle, why could the vehicle be the problem? Are there issues with the vehicle? Like the engine didn't start a couple of times in the morning. Why the road? Is there a construction site that is usually not there, which causes a delay? Why other participants? Was there a traffic jam? And finally, why you? Have you made wrong decisions while driving? So maybe you just took the wrong road, or maybe you were just calling with a friend in the morning and just forgot to go to the right direction. Or did you drive too slowly? Or did you wake up later? As you see, waking up later in this picture is only one possibility. But the previous 5 whys example focused directly on this, ignoring all the other paths. And this is the power of the logic tree and the flaw of using the 5 whys incorrectly. So let's stop making the 5 whys a linear process, because it isn't. That's not the case. It is multidimensional instead and way more complex. The logic tree helps us in keeping the overall overview so we don't get stuck in a single path or even in the wrong one. Alright, have you already considered liking and subscribing? For you it's free and it makes sure you won't miss out on the next videos and it helps me in growing the channel, so it's a win-win. Thank you for watching, take care, bye.
In this video, I'm going to show you requirements gathering techniques for a business analyst. We will go over several techniques in detail in order to find out the pros, cons, and concrete use cases on when to use them and when not. In the end, I'll give you my recommended requirements gathering techniques, which I personally use the most in my job as business analyst in a global operating bank. If this sounds interesting to you, then make sure to watch this video until the end. Let's create a mind map first on which useful and also popular techniques for business analysts are out there for requirements gathering. The very first technique is document-based analysis. Like the name says, it's all about documents here, not about users, stakeholders, or the clients. Here the first step is to gather all the documents available and relevant for your case. This means there is a lot of reading involved. Requirements documents can be very long, so be patient. Key is to understand the system by reading the documents, so you're able to build a baseline of knowledge, which is very helpful throughout the whole requirements gathering process. This requirements gathering technique is pretty much used every single time. It's basically the starting point in requirements analysis. The very next technique I want to cover are surveys and questionnaires. Surveys are a great tool to collect answers on standardized questions. So it's perfect for getting a high volume of data, because you can easily send the survey to hundreds of people and get their insights, and you don't have to talk to them one by one. You can include open and closed questions, and especially for closed questions, it is easy to evaluate. The issue here is really that asking the right questions is a challenge. And you also don't want to influence participants with the question themselves, because they could bias. Let's jump to the next requirements gathering techniques for a business analyst. Shadowing. Shadowing is to accompany a user or a stakeholder. By this, you're living the process the user goes through every single day. That's a powerful technique because you're also able to perceive what I call silent requirements. Silent requirements are requirements your stakeholder won't tell you because they are so self-evident for them. The downside here for sure is that it's very time consuming for you as a business analyst to shadow multiple stakeholders. Now let's go to the probably most used technique, at least for me, interviews. Interviewers are basically that what surveys cannot provide to you. By having someone in an interview, you can get very specific. And also you're able to get feedback instantly. So there is a question-answer loop where you can dive deeper with follow-up questions to really get down to the root. Requirements are most of the time something very specific, so it actually is pretty much necessary to dive deeper. The next requirements gathering technique I want to show you is the workshop. A workshop is not only an interview, a workshop involves many people at once and also enables them to work together on specifying the requirements. A workshop is not only an interview, a workshop involves many people at once and also enables them to work together on specifying the requirements. Here the role of the business analyst, so you, is also to ensure to guide the stakeholders at the table into the right direction, so people don't get lost. The goal definition or the desired outcome of the session is important, because when many people sit around a table for a long time, that's very costly. These workshops can go over hours or even full days, as per my experience. And if you have seniors also on the table, you can imagine how much such a workshop costs in the end. So better make sure to get the outcome. After clarifying the workshop, let me explain to you the last important requirements gathering technique for business analysts. Prototyping. What prototyping is about is Basically that you build an increment of your product or system based on the initial requirements. Show this increment to the stakeholder and from there on gather the next requirements. This is an iterative and incremental process. These concepts are part of the Agile methodology. Have you already worked with Agile and other methodologies? If so, let me know in the comment section below. After describing these requirements gathering techniques, I want to contrast them against each other in a table. Let's talk about their pros, cons and use cases on when to use them and when not. Like I've mentioned in the beginning, document analysis has the pro that you are not dependent on others because the information is inside the document. The con here is that you cannot ask questions to this document if there is something unclear to you or maybe any gaps. Also in reality, we often have missing documentations or even, like I said, gaps in these documents. The use case here is that document analysis is a good requirements gathering technique, especially for business analysts for having a starting point or an entering point into the project. You can leverage existing documentation to build your baseline of know-how. That's good to get up to speed with the topic. Surveys, on the other hand, have the advantage of an easy evaluation of the data and also getting a lot of data. The issue, although, is we cannot get too specific in these surveys because people cannot ask questions to clarify something. The use case would be if you want very generic information about the stakeholders or the use of a system or process, then surveys might be fine. Shadowing has the huge advantage of gathering real-life data. You're able to get hands-on experience as you observe and shadow your stakeholder or future user. The con here is the time-consuming aspect for the business analyst. Nonetheless, this technique is useful when your stakeholder has no time for meetings with you, but it's fine to shadow him or her to get more insights. Especially for process improvement, shadowing is a very powerful technique. Interviews have the pro to get real-time answers and also to have follow-up questions in order to get very specific. On the other hand, your stakeholder needs to have time for these meetings that also can get very time-consuming. Nonetheless, interviews are perfect to get more detailed requirements. Workshops have the pro that a big group of stakeholders is involved, and therefore the probability to cover all the important requirements is higher. Furthermore, the acceptance from stakeholders is also higher because they are involved in the process. The con here is especially the time-consuming aspect. Full-day workshops with 10 people are very costly. In my experience, I used workshops in complex scenarios when we had inconsistent requirements. It helped a lot to bring stakeholders on the same page. Prototyping has the pro that you deliver something tangible with each increment. That helps the stakeholder to understand what we are doing. On the other hand, producing an increment each time and then going back to the stakeholder can get time consuming. The use case is when you have unclear requirements, but the stakeholder wants to see results frequently. Now let's summarize. Based on my personal experience, I would recommend to always start the document-based analysis. So read the documents to build your initial know-how. After that, interviews will be your main requirements gathering technique as a business analyst. Interviews enable you to get different perspectives and angles on the topic. Facilitate workshops if you have complex inconsistencies or stakeholders are not on the same page. And use the concept of prototyping in order to get feedback from the stakeholder. Try to make these feedback loops 1 or 2 weeks so you can sync with the stakeholder frequently and issues come up faster. Also, bring stakeholders on the same page with sync meetings. Optional are surveys and shadowing. The reasons were mentioned before. What technique have you already used? Do you want me to dive deeper into any of these techniques? Let me know in the comment section below. Also tell me your opinion on these requirements gathering techniques for business analysts. If you found this video helpful, leave a like, and if you don't want to miss out new content, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching and take care.
And this is why this technique is so powerful, and for me, probably the most underrated requirements gathering technique for business analysts. In this video, I want to talk about the most underrated requirements gathering technique that is out there for business analysts. Furthermore than just mentioning this technique, I want to show you what it exactly is, how to use it, and why to use it, so what's the benefit of it. This requirements gathering technique is called shadowing. For all of you who don't know what shadowing means observing a user on day-to-day tasks while using the application the user is using. So basically you have the chance to see what does the user click, what is the real user journey of the user. Now you might ask, why should you do shadowing and what's the benefit of it? The biggest benefit shadowing has is that you have a real-life perspective on the pain points users are experiencing while using the application from first hand. You are able to basically exactly measure the time a user needs to perform certain processes, to perform certain actions. And as you know, time equals money. You can directly see how much money it does cost that the user is doing a certain task in the application. So now I want to tell you how you can do shadowing effectively and efficiently. The first thing you need to do is to tell the user that you would like to shadow them in order to really observe their real life issues, real life experiences with the application in use. Because as you could imagine, if you do not tell the user, observing the user is something very strange and the user would not react positively on this. So be transparent, ask the user you would like to shadow them for their benefit actually. The next thing you should do as a business analyst is to block out your calendar so you are booked for this time. Then actually it starts. So you're sitting next to the user, you're observing the user over the time period. Also let the user explain what they are doing and why they are doing what they are doing. With that, you just don't only see what the user is doing, but you also know the incentive behind the motivation. So maybe they want to achieve something and they do it a certain way, but because you know why they did it, maybe there's a better alternative to do it. And with knowing the reason, you could actually come up with a better solution. Then you have to note down the pain points. So while the user is performing the tasks, you will see or hear that there is a pain point. So the user is seeing something as bad, not very well developed, something that needs to be optimized, and that's a pain point. And that's where you come into play, and you have to note that down. What is the pain point? Where exactly does it happen? What exactly is the pain point like? Is it usability, user experience? Is it a missing functionality? What exactly is it? Note that down. Also note down what the real user journey is for the process. Very often we assume there's a standard process, but in real life there's a different user journey. So the journey a user has to go through in order to achieve the goal, whatever it might be. So note down what is reality, and then you can compare on what was planned in the first place. And also, sometimes from your initiative, ask the user why they're doing a certain step right now. This helps to have this conversation more engaging, right? So sometimes you have to take the initiative and not only the user. Very recently, actually today, I used shadowing again to really see the pain points of the user, which helps me as a product owner or as a business analyst to really understand the real need of a user. And this is why this technique is so powerful, and for me, probably the most underrated requirements gathering technique for business analysts.
Do you want to know a requirements gathering workshop technique you could use as a business analyst? In this video, I'm going to show you my technique, which contains only 3 steps, and I will also present a case study on how to use these steps. Let's get started right away. The very first step of the technique is the workshop preparation, then the execution of the workshop, and number 3 is a follow-up of the workshop. Let me show you a quick case study so we can use this technique. So let's assume in your team of business analysts and other business analysts analyzed a business process. Let's say you're working in a financial institution, for example in a bank, and the business process for a loan request or receiving a loan request could look as follows. So the process is starting, you're checking the credit risk score, and based on this you either accept the loan or you reject the loan based on the credit risk score, if it's positive or negative. That is the business process. And now let's say you want to make a workshop on this business flow. So first things first, what is the first step? It is the preparation of the workshop. And the very first thing is always define the goal. What is the goal of the workshop? What do you want to achieve? What should be the result or the outcome? Always think of what do you want to leave the meeting with, right? So in your hands, do you want to have a product in your hands? Do you want a list in your hands after completing the workshop? Be clear what your goal is. After having the goal, it's time to break down the goal into an agenda. An agenda is there to actually achieve the goal. So we are breaking down the goal in multiple steps, and this is what the agenda is then in the end. Identify invitees and send out invite. Who is necessary for the meeting? Try to use as little stakeholders as possible, but as much as needed. The larger the group is, the harder it gets to actually gather requirements. send out reading material if appropriate, so stakeholders can, before the workshop, read the material and be aligned on, let's say, some knowledge about something. Also, prepare a template for documenting the requirements. Basically, it depends on what you're trying to gather as a requirement, but having a template which suits your needs is always a great thing. Later in the video, I will show you my template. And last but not least, in the preparation, also prepare questions to ask in advance, so you will have this dialogue in the workshop and there is no silence. So let's hop back to the case study. Like I've said, the first thing is define the goal. What could be a goal for here in our case study and the workshop on this business flow? A goal could be the definition of epics, or let's say high-level requirements for the business process lined out below, the loan request processing business process, including its starts, ends, and activities. So we want to analyze the whole flow, each activity, each decision, each start and end. So with this goal actually, so we want to go out of the meeting with a list of requirements for the whole flow. How can we break down this goal into an agenda? A possible agenda could look like as following. First, we want to analyze the process start triggers. So how is this process getting started? Who is starting it? When does it get started? Under which circumstances? After this, we just go through the flow. So checking on the first activity, check credit score. What is this activity all about? How does it look like? Which systems are involved? Who is involved? And so going furthermore on the decision on accepting, rejecting a flow, and also how does it look like to accept a loan? How does it look like to reject a loan? Which actors and which systems are involved? And in the end events, right? So analyzing how does an end really look like? How do we know the process is done? Do we need to let other systems know that the process is done, right? So really going from beginning to the end. And with this agenda, we are achieving our goal. So now let's hop to the execution. Start with the goal and note it down anywhere. My recommendation very clearly is to start with the goal, and if possible, write it down somewhere in the room if it's a physical meeting. The reason for this is because the goal statement is the vision of the workshop, the reason why you are in there. And if you have it open all the time, people can have a look on the goal and align on it again. Then set up and agree on some workshop rules. I like to start my workshops with some ground rules to ensure efficiency and effectiveness of the workshop. For example, rules as respect, focus, and engagement, meaning let people finish the sentences, be focused on the topic, so whenever there is off topic going on, that you as a moderator are allowed to interrupt, and engagement because this workshop lives of the engagement of every participant. After everyone has agreed on the workshop rules, you have an alignment on the rules. That's great. So now it's time for you to lead the workshop actively with a central theme. Like I've said, we have pointed out an agenda and a goal. And whenever we try to get off track, it's your job to lead back into the direction we want to go, to the central theme, going by the agenda, going towards our goal. Now it's also your time to ask prepared questions. Because you already know what you want to get out of the workshop, you can ask prepared questions. You can prepare them beforehand. I've made another video on prepared questions. I will link this video down below. Then use your template for documenting requirements. Now let me show you my template, which also could be beneficial to you. So here you can see my template for gathering requirements in a workshop. In this sheet, I'm capturing all the requirements. Every requirement needs to be identified by an ID. Then we can also reference the process step. As pointed out in the case study, it was about a process, right? And so every requirement has to be linked to a certain process step, the start of a process, the end, an activity. This is what I capture here in column B, process step. Then the title of the requirement in column C. Then the description, what this requirement is all about. In column E, I have the justification or the business need. So basically, why do we need this requirement? This column helps to identify if a requirement is really needed or not. If you don't have a business need and there is no justification for a requirement, this means actually it's not necessary. So we should not capture it. Then in column F, I have acceptance criteria. So basically, how would the stakeholder know that his or her requirement was completed? So we need some acceptance criteria. Then the source of the requirement. So basically, which department or which person came up with the requirement. And also the priority. So there are many ways how we can prioritize requirements. I've also created a video on this. I will link it down below. But basically, you could have priorities in the sense of it's a must-have or just a should-have and stuff like this. And this is the template for capturing requirements. Then I suggest to also have an Excel tab with the questions. So here you can see the questions. This time it's in German. As I've pointed out, I've created a video in English and there the questions are in English, and just check out questions there. But also have it handy so whenever you feel like need a new question, you can refer back to this page. Also have a tab for action items. So basically what needs to be done, by whom, and by when has it to be done. So in this table, I'm capturing those actions and set it out later for people to come back to me with the answer. And as pointed out, when there is off topic, I suggest you to note it down so people don't feel that you're too harsh when interrupting. Noting it down, sending it out later, but tell the stakeholders in this workshop you're not going to discuss the off topic, but it's noted down, so that's a fair compromise. Then in the last minutes of your meeting, wrap up what you have decided on in the last 5 minutes, show some appreciation to your stakeholders, and announce the next steps so people are aware what's happening next. Now the follow-up, the third and last step of this technique. During your workshop, you have written down your notes, which are not really formalized, it's just your own language. And what you need to do is you need to formalize your notes, rephrase them a little bit, make them more structured. After this is done, you have to verify and validate your requirements. Regarding verification and validation of requirements, I've created another video too. I will link it down below. But very brief, verification and validation is all about, do your requirements meet some quality standards and do they make sense regarding the whole business objective of the product? So make sure to watch this video too in order to verify and validate your requirement. After this is done, it's time for you to send out your requirements to the stakeholders to seek confirmation. What I like to do is I'm sending it out and I say, please come back to me by end of the week with your feedback if you disagree on something or something is unclear. If not, I would assume the requirements are confirmed from your end. With doing this, you're on the safe side. Also, send out action items you have probably noted down during the meeting. So let's say if there was an open question on something, send out this question to the group and also with a deadline by when the stakeholder needs to answer the question, and also send out the off topic which you have captured during the workshop. And last but not least, try to seek feedback from the participants of your workshop. This could happen in person if you're seeing the stakeholder by asking, how was the workshop for you? Do you have any feedback? Or you could send out a quick and brief survey to actually gather feedback in this way. These are the most important diagrams every business analyst must know. The business process diagram, the system diagram, the entity relationship diagram or class diagram, and the state diagram. For each of those 4 diagrams, I will explain what it concretely is, how it does look like, and why you need to know this diagram. Let's start with the first one, the system diagram. A system diagram in the end is a diagram to show how a system is structured in an architectural and structural way. With a system diagram, you can directly see how systems are interconnected with each other. To give an example, you could imagine a user interface. A user is using an interface. After clicking a certain button, there is a back end, a middle layer, which in the end is doing an API call to a database. And based on this request, the database is giving back a response and the user is seeing the response of the database. And this behavior here can be modeled in a system diagram. A system diagram could look something like this. Here we can see 2 systems, System A and System B. System A contains of application 1 and 2, and System B contains of application 3 and 4. As you can see, application 1 and 2 both can access each other, and application 2 has access to the database. And you can see System B has access to application 2. That's a traditional system diagram. You can see which application or which system is interconnected with each other. For example, if there's a change in the database, you know that application 2 is directly affected and application 1 and System B is indirectly affected because these components are only directly connected to application 2. So whenever the database changes, you also know that probably in application 2 something has to be changed as well. And that's the power of the system diagram. Then jumping to the state diagram. Let me explain this one with an example. Let's imagine you have a data object, a bank account. And whenever a bank account gets created, so you're onboarding a client, a bank account has a status or a state active. And of course, there are other states a bank account can be in. For example, you can close the bank account, then you have a closed state, or you can deactivate the bank account, then you are inactive. But of course, you can activate the account again and you're back to active. But also you can close the bank account in the inactive state. And here you can see which states can a data object, in this example a bank account, be in. This diagram helps the developers to really understand how you can traverse from status A to status B and which combinations are not possible. For example, you can go back from a closed state to an active state. And this diagram says so much more than 1,000 words. Just imagine plain text to explain the states. This diagram does it a lot better. The next diagram I want to show you is the entity relationship model, or also the class diagram in UML. But in this video, I will just focus on the entity relationship model. The entity relationship model, or ERM, is there to show you how entities, or let's say data objects, are connected to each other and what their relationship is. Let's again have an example. We have accounts, bank accounts, and we have parties, so clients of the bank. And a party can have multiple accounts, and an account can be owned by multiple parties. So you can have joint accounts, right? And this relationship between these entities is an N to M relationship, so multi to multi. There are other relationships too, but this one is the most complex form. An account could be defined by the account ID, a status, and a currency, and the party could be defined by a party ID, the name of the party, and date of birth, let's say. Each of these entities can also be represented as a table in the database. For example, here you can see the table for accounts and the table for parties. For example, account 0 is active and the currency is dollars. Party 0 is James and was born on the 1st of January 1990. Now this end-to-end relationship means there is also a relationship between account and parties. And here we can see in the yellow table the relationship. For example, account 0 is owned by party 0, and also account 1 is owned by party 0. So this party has multiple accounts. But also you can see that account 1 is not only owned by party 0, but also by party 1. So account 1 is a split or a joint account for multiple parties. And this is how you can really see this end-to-end relationship between these objects. So it's a bit more complex than having an easy one-to-one relationship. The entity relationship model is really good for showing the developers how data objects are connected with each other. Just imagine to explain the developers in a requirement in plain text how these accounts and parties are connected, that you can have multiple on each side. This diagram tells it so much more easy and specific and efficient. Now lastly, probably the most important diagram is the business process diagram. The business process diagram is a well-defined diagram with a start and an end and has a timely perspective. So from left to right, we are traversing through time. That's the difference of all the other diagrams before. This one is dynamic, not static. For example, in this process, you can see on the left-hand side, when it starts, a loan request was received. So let's say you are working in a bank and your application is registering that a new loan was requested. The first activity here is to check the credit score of the client. Let's say a credit score is a number which can be positive or negative. Here we check in the process, is the credit score of the client positive? If so, we accept the loan request and the flow ends in this path. But if the credit score is not positive, we reject the loan and that's it. Imagine again explaining this requirement to a developer in plain text. This diagram is doing it so much more efficiently and accurate. Here you can really see what is determining the decision, right? The credit score. So it's really easy to see what the decision is like. A diagram or a picture says always more than 1,000 words.
How do you gather requirements within a requirements gathering interview? Or how in general do you structure such an interview? Exactly this question I'm going to talk about today. Get comfortable and let's get started right away. Imagine the following scenario. You are the lead business analyst within a bank. This bank has an internal application where the relationship managers directly operate with the clients of the bank, for example, wealthy clients. Now the product owner tells you that he has to make sure that the data quality standards for this application are of high standard. Otherwise, the project cannot go live. Now it's your job to enable the change. So now you need to gather requirements in order to really understand what this whole data quality topic is all about. And this is how you do it. First, set up a first meeting. In the first meeting, it's key to understand that the goal is, for now, just a kickoff. When I say kickoff, you don't really directly gather all the requirements. Key is really to understand what is the true need of the product owner. What is the goal in the end? What is the problem? And what are we trying to solve? In order to understand the real problem, I've created already a dedicated video for this. I will just link it anywhere up here. So please make sure to watch this first so you understand the key of problem solving first. So after you've watched this video, and in order to understand the real problem of your product owner, it's now time for the next step, the second meeting. The importance for the second meeting is to set the goal clearly. How far do you want to come in this session? What is the goal here too? Is the goal probably high-level requirements? If so, then in this meeting you can discuss the requirements. A very first principle in requirements gathering interviews is seek to understand first, then to be understood. Listen carefully for keywords such as I want to, I need to, I have to, or I'm doing X, Y, Z. What is your product owner telling you? This is key here. Be a good listener. And also every single time you kind of like hear one of these keywords, try really to understand if this requirement is derivable from the real problem, because you want to make sure you don't have unnecessary requirements. So every requirement has to be linked to solving the problem in the end. So it's also key to ask your product owner the question, why? Why are you doing X, Y, Z? Why do we need this or that? Because by saying why, you have the chance to understand what is the intention of this action. Because probably there's maybe a better solution to solve this. Also, be active in the conversation. Try to repeat the requirements your product owner is telling you. This just helps directly finding flaws and your product owner just giving you a confirmation if you're gathering the right thing. Not only repeating, but also documenting the requirements. You need to document all of them. I've also created a dedicated video on how to document requirements in an Excel spreadsheet. Very basic, very easy. I will also link it right above here, so make sure to watch this too. But anyways, in this video I will give you a very brief introduction into this, but if you want to have more information, make sure to watch it also. So now you can see a certain list or table which attributes a requirement should have in order to document it. So for example, every requirement needs an identifier, so an ID, so you know exactly which one you're talking about, title, so you can name it, a description, really kind of like specifying the requirement, and also some other points like the author, the source, the owner, who's owning this requirement, who was the source, so you get more information probably about the requirement, and also the author, probably it's just you, but in case you are working with someone else, it's also good to know who is the author here, so you can ask also him or her about the requirement. Like I've said, there are many attributes for a requirement, and I've all captured it in the video I mentioned before. So after documenting all the requirements, it's also key to every single time have the end in mind. What do I mean when I say have the end in mind? Like I said, we are talking about a data quality topic, so have the end in mind. What is the concrete outcome, the end goal? Is it probably a check which is showing you how good the data is, or what is the concrete outcome, right? What do you want to hand over to your product owner in the end? Keep that in mind and you will never lose focus on how to achieve your goal. And also try to emphasize the words by drawing graphics during your interview. You could use a PowerPoint slide, you could use a whiteboard. Try to model whatever your product owner is telling you in basic requirements, right? If he's describing maybe some databases, how they interact with each other, or maybe he is kind of like describing the user interface he wants, try to mock it, try to draw some graphics, create some tables, whatever it is. Try to use visuals to understand better and document more clearly what's going on here. After all this is done, you can wrap up the meeting, so just kind of like telling the product owner again what you have documented for now, how the status quo is, and probably also will give you a confirmation that that's kind of like true, what he's also thinking. And last but not least, in the second meeting, also sending it out, so your product owner has the written format of what you were just communicating to each other in this meeting. Alright, after this second meeting, there's something more going on. What we need to do now is we need further refinement and also prototyping. What do I mean by saying this? Basically, now you have an initial set of requirements. But of course, requirements are not something like from the first day you all have them and you're ready to go. You have to refine them more. I mean, as you go on in the project, you will find yourself in a situation where you need more requirements or more detailed requirements. So you need refinement. So basically you will need more meetings with your product owner or a representative to refine more what exactly is needed here. And also prototyping gives you the chance to implement those refinements and showing maybe the prototype to your product owner. Is that the right direction I'm going, or do I need any adjustments? This cycle helps you a lot in order to come closer to your goal and also satisfy the need of your product owner. And that's basically how you can conduct such an interview, right? It's really a process from kicking it off, having the cycle where you refine it more and more and come closer to the end, which you always have in mind. If you're interested in more of this business analysis related content, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out for the next video. Alright, see you the next time. Take care. Bye. In this video, I'm going to show you how to conduct requirements gathering as a business analyst with real-life examples. In the end of this video, you will have a good understanding of what is involved in identifying a user need, how to transform this user need into user stories, how to define acceptance criteria for these stories, how to clarify topics as a business analyst, then how to translate business requirements into functional requirements, and in the end, writing test cases for your requirements. If this sounds interesting to you, make sure to watch this video until the end. Let's get started right away. In order to understand what is involved in identifying a user need, let's imagine for a second that you are a business analyst working for an insurance company. This insurance company has front employees who are using an application to manage client relationships. With this application, the front employee is able to onboard a client. And let's also imagine for a second that this onboarding looks as follows. Basically, the front employee is onboarding the client by capturing several data and documents. Then a team lead has to approve that, and also compliance will approve this, and in the end, this onboarding is done. After completion, the front employee is able to sell products to the customer. But now, where is the business need? An onboarding can take up to 14 days. Therefore, the client has to wait 14 days until several products can be sold to the client. It should be possible to sell products earlier to the client, especially basic products which don't need any approvals. This is the business need. After understanding the business need, let's now have a look on how to capture a user story. Here illustrated, you can see the business analyst and the front employee, and the business analyst has the job to really find out what is the requirement of the front employee. So what does the front employee really need? And for this, the user story template is very often used in agile projects. The user story template is basically just describing a functionality in the following format. It always says as a, then the user role, I want to, then the capability of this functionality, so that, and then the benefit. Let's make a practical example on how to use a user story. So in our example, as a front employee, I want to be able to sell products to a client before the client's onboarding is completed, so that I can generate profits earlier and the client can enjoy the benefits of our products earlier. That's the user story based on the business need we just have clarified. Every user story is also backed with acceptance criteria. So the next step is to define acceptance criteria. Basically, the question is, under which conditions will the front employee accept the solution? That's the basic question, and acceptance criteria are the answer to this. If you just have again a look on the user story, by just talking to your front employee, it is possible that the following acceptance criteria could be listed. The first one could be, it is possible to start the sell insurance products process for a client who is not yet fully onboarded. So basically, if this is happening, the front employee says the solution is implemented. On top, another acceptance criteria could be, it is only possible to sell the following products to a client who is not yet fully onboarded. Product A, B, and C. Another acceptance criteria mentioned from the front employee could be, if the front employee is a certified financial advisor, then the front employee is able to sell the products A, B, C, and D. So these are the acceptance criteria. Now if you have a look on acceptance criteria 3, it states if the front employee is a certified financial advisor, then we can sell product A to D. And the second acceptance criteria is not incorporating any condition like if it's a financial advisor or not. So that is a missing requirement. So we can directly insert this to say if the front employee is not a certified financial advisor, then it's only product A, B, and C. Alright, so now we have defined the business need, the user story, and acceptance criteria. Now we have to make some clarifications to really understand every acceptance criteria. Let's go with the first one, for example. I've just marked in red the parts which need more clarification. So what exactly is the sell insurance products process? How does it look? What exactly is a client on a data level? How does a client look like on a data level? And also on a data perspective, what does it mean to be fully onboarded? By having document analysis and also interviews, we can get the answers to these questions. The sell insurance products process after having an interview could be, for example, that you look up the client via a name, then select the client, select the products, enter details, submit it, and then you're done, right? So we have a persistence to the database. This could be the process. Then the question, what is a client on a data perspective? Basically, it could be that the database has a table called clients and every client is in this database. And now the question, what does it mean to be onboarded? A client data object has an attribute called status. And if the status is equal to onboarded, then it means you're onboarded. If it's in onboarding, it means you're not yet fully onboarded. And now, for example, the third acceptance criteria, the question could be, what is a certified financial advisor on a data perspective? And the answer could be, an employee data object has a flag or an attribute called, is financial advisor certified, yes or no? Alright, so after clarifying all these terms, now we have a good understanding what is the real requirement and how really it should look in the end. The next step after understanding all that is to translate them into functional requirements. Now you might ask, what do you mean by translating? So until now, we only have requirements in the business language from the user perspective. And in order to implement them with software development, we have to make a translation. So we have from business language to technical language, which in the end the developer can implement. And that's the job of the business analyst to translate. So let's on the left side document the business language. So all the acceptance criteria on the left side. And for each, we want to have a technical requirement in technical language. If we have a look on the first one, as you remember, it is possible to start the sell insurance products process for a client who is not yet fully onboarded. That's business language. What could be the technical language? The technical language, in best case, should always start with the system shall. This is just indicating the functional requirement of a system. So the system shall allow the user to proceed the sell insurance products process for a client with client.status equals in onboarding. So that's the technical expression of the business language on the left side. If you want to do another example, for example, the second one, this is about the financial advisor. It's just on the other side, on the technical language, that you have this user.is financial advisor certified, yes. And also for the products with the ID of the product, so the developer knows which product to implement here. That's the translation between business language and technical language. So after translating, we are already here at writing test cases. Every requirement needs to be tested and therefore we need a test case. Let's again have one functional requirement that's here at the top. The system shall allow the user to proceed if the client status is in onboarding. And a possible test case could look as follows. The test case is describing the steps. So given a front employee starts this process and enters an existing client name, clicks on submit, and when a client was found under the client name and its status is in onboarding, then the system shall allow the user to proceed the process. This is the test case for this functional requirement. Of course, now we could write a test case for each requirement, but just to make this video pretty short, we will leave it like this, but now you know how to write a test case for each functional requirement. Now in order to sum everything up, let's have first a top-down view. In the beginning, we have this business need. Based on this business need, we can create a user story. And this user story is pretty short, so it needs to be backed up by acceptance criteria. These acceptance criteria need then to be translated into technical language, so we have a technical requirement. And for this requirement, we can have a test case. That's a top-down view. If we go bottom-up, it means every test case has to be linked to a technical requirement, which in the end has to be linked to a user acceptance criteria. And this criteria has to be linked to user story, and this ultimately has to be linked to the business need. And that's basically how you do bulletproof requirements gathering as a business analyst. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to write bulletproof requirements as a business analyst so that you're able to deliver high quality requirements in your project in only 5 minutes. Furthermore, you will love the technique I'm going to show you, and I will also have a bonus tip for you in the end. Let's start right away. So when we are talking about bulletproof requirements, what is a requirement? For this video, let's say a requirement is a specification of what should be implemented. So they describe how the system should behave. Which criteria makes a requirement bulletproof? Let me list them and then I will explain you each one. A bulletproof requirement is atomic, complete, consistent, concise, feasible,
unambiguous, understandable, testable, and prioritized. Atomic means the bulletproof requirement can stand on its own and it's not mixed with another requirement. Complete, as you might know, are there any gaps in this requirement from a logical perspective? Consistency is if you have multiple requirements, you want to make them consistent so they look kind of each other. Being concise is key because you don't want to have requirements which are so long you don't want to read them anymore. So be concise. Feasibility is this requirement even realistic? Is it possible? Unambiguous, this one is really tough. It's all about making your requirement clear and unambiguous. In the end, I will share a bonus tip for you how to make requirements unambiguous, so make sure to stick until the end. Understandable means if people can basically understand it, so your stakeholders. Testable is this requirement verifiable? Are you able to create a test case to verify if this requirement is implemented or not? And in the end, prioritized. Each requirement should have a value and therefore be prioritized in terms of how important it is or how unimportant it is. So after understanding what makes a requirement bulletproof, you also know there are various different kind of requirements. So for example, we have user requirements or solution requirements. And each kind of a requirement has a template to write it down. For example, for user requirements, you probably are going to use user stories. And for solution requirements, you are going to use eventually the Gherkin format. In this video, I will dive a bit more deeper into the Gherkin format and also make some examples here for bulletproof requirements in Gherkin. How does Gherkin look like? Just as a user story format, the Gherkin one has also a format. Here it is, given a precondition, when a certain condition is met, then the system should behave in a certain way. Let me make an example. Given the user clicked on the buy button, when the transaction is successful, then the system shall notify the user fast. That is a requirement in Gherkin format. But is this requirement also bulletproof? It's not. It's not bulletproof. Why? First, this requirement is pretty ambiguous, don't you think? What does fast mean? What does notifying the user mean? What is notification? How does a notification look like? Is it a pop-up? Is it whatever is it? How long shall we see this notification? So it's ambiguous. Then is it testable? I don't think so. Fast is not testable. It's not quantifiable. So we need a number, for example, 10 seconds or whatever. And the question, is it complete? No, we are not complete here, especially because of these two questions I've asked before. This requirement is not bulletproof. So how do we make a bulletproof requirement? Let me show you this one. Let's think again. There is a shop, there is a buy button, and when the user clicks this buy button, we want to notify the user that this order was placed successfully. So how do we write a bulletproof requirement for this activity? Again, the same given and when, like given the user clicked on the buy button, when the transaction is successful, then the system shall redirect the user on a blank website with the message, your order was placed successfully in the first line of the page within 2 seconds. Is this requirement now bulletproof? And yes, it is bulletproof. It fulfills all these criteria I've mentioned before. It's testable. It's unambiguous, right? So now people really know what needs to be done here. But as pointed out in the beginning, I have a bonus tip for you to make sure that requirements are unambiguous. Let me show you this one before you leave the video. So how do I make requirements unambiguous? You have to ask the important W questions. Who, how, where, what, and when. So who is doing something in this requirement? It's the customer who is buying or clicking the buy button. So you could also in the requirement mention the user, so the customer. How is this happening? Basically, we have a notification which is not disappearing, so that's the how. Where do we want to have this notification? It's the first line of the screen. What? What is the message in this case? Your order was placed successfully. And when? Within 2 seconds. By answering all these W questions, the requirement is unambiguous and we have a bulletproof requirement. I hope that helps you out. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, and welcome to this training for business analysts. In this video, I'm going to show you how to structure and maintain requirements. What can you expect from this video? To understand how to structure and maintain requirements, I want to first show the hierarchy of requirements. This is key to understand because requirements can be on different levels in the requirements hierarchy. After that, I want to really show you how to maintain from front to back. So from the business need to the specific IT requirement. All this will happen with a practical real-life example. So you really have real-life examples to work on, so it's not too theoretical for you. And also I'm going to use only Microsoft Excel. So in the end you will have an easy-to-use Excel template, no other tools needed. Let's jump right into it. So requirements hierarchy, what's that? As you know, everything starts with a business need. There is no project or no requirements gathering or no work for a business analyst without a business need. Let me explain you what a business need is. Imagine the following scenario. You have a company and now because of regulations or because of the market or any other circumstances, there is now a need or an opportunity for the company. So the company has to enable change. And the work of a business analyst is enabling the change by defining needs and recommending solutions that deliver value to stakeholders, so that you have this transition from company A before the change to company A after the change. The need of the cause is now solved or the opportunity is gained. That's basically the business need. It's very high level. So after the highest level, the business need, we have to break it down in order to find the business requirements. In order to fulfill the need, the business need, we have to fulfill the business requirements. In a couple of minutes, I will explain you this in more detail as promised in the beginning. Below business requirements, we have stakeholder requirements. Just meaning that the business requirement is now focused on the stakeholder, right? So a business requirement is only fulfilled if the underlying stakeholder requirements are also met. And beneath stakeholder requirements, we have these solution requirements, also called in the end as functional or non-functional requirements. Let me explain functional and non-functional requirements first. A functional requirement is basically the functionality that you have in an application, like generating a report or downloading a report or inviting some other members via the application. This is functional. Then we have non-functional. That's basically something only for the back end. Let's say how fast the page is loading or how fast an email is sent. It's really tag related and it's not a functional requirement. It's really like a performance thing about velocity or something else. And lastly, we also have transition requirements. That's something very temporary. Like, for example, that a certain stakeholder needs a training before we can use the solution. That's a transition requirement. Alright, after understanding the theoretical part of requirements hierarchy, let's now jump to Microsoft Excel and use this with a basic practical example. Alright, I'm right now here in Microsoft Excel and now you can see my pretty empty spreadsheet. This Excel has just two tabs. Let's go one by one. The first tab here, that's requirements. And as you can see, I have pre-filled some columns. Basically, every requirement that you capture need a certain amount of attributes that define this requirement. So let's go one by one through every column and then let's get to the examples. So first is the ID. Every requirement needs an identifier, so it's easily to distinguish between requirement A and B. This can be just a number, like a counting number, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Or you can combine IDs in the sense of having a string, some characters, and a number. It's really up to you and up to your context. I cannot say one is better or one is worse. It's depending on your context. After having an ID, you need a title for the requirement. It's a very short title, so people kind of like know what this is about. It's not the full requirement, like a full sentence. It's just maybe those 1, 2, 3 words to give it a title. Then we have the description, and that's basically your requirement. If you're using the user story format, for example, you can put it in here, or not, you can use your whole sentence or sentences for the description. Then we have the type. The type of a requirement is just naming if it's the business need, like top of everything, or is it a business requirement, or is it more specific, like a solution requirement. That's why we use the type here. Then we have the source, and the source is basically saying who is the source of this requirement, who brought that up. This is important because with the source here, we just know whom to contact in case of questions about this requirement. This can be a person or a group or a department. It's up to you. Then we have an owner. I know that sounds a bit maybe confusing, source and owner, But source, like I said, is the one who brought that up. An owner is who will be responsible for this, who will be the stakeholder for this, who will have a stake in it. That's the owner. When we put our examples in, maybe this one gets more clear to you. Then we have the author. Author is just who wrote this requirement. In this video, for example, it's only me who will write those requirements. But if you are working in a team of business analysts, for example, this column is very helpful to identify who wrote this requirement. If you're just solely working on yourself here, then you can probably delete this column. Then we have the value. As you know, everything we do has to provide value, otherwise it's nonsense. But of course, every specific requirement is hard to measure in value, right? So maybe just the business need is very important to name as a value. Like I said, a business need could be a threat from the government, for example, and if we don't include this change, maybe we will have fees of over millions a year, right? That's the value basically then. But this column probably for a business analyst deep in IT is probably not that important because measuring the concrete value is not that easy. Then we have the priority, and this one is really key. The priority just states how important is this requirement? Is it like if we do not implement this, can we still go live? That's basically the question. If we cannot, and this is a showstopper, then the priority is top, the highest priority that is possible. And sometimes we will have requirements which are nice to have, but not needed for day one, but maybe needed for another one, another date, maybe in a year or so, right? So you can play around with the priority, like having a top priority, very high, high, medium, critical. It's up to you how you want to name those priorities, but you need them for sure. Then the due date, when this requirement should be implemented. This goes hand in hand with the priority. If the due date is coming closer, the priority might change because of that. Then you have the status. The status of a requirement is always like, what's the current status quo? Is it just drafted? Is it already confirmed? Is it implemented? Is it tested? There are multiple statuses you could put in here, but it's up to you what makes sense for you and your organization. Then we have acceptance criteria. As you know, when you implement a requirement, you need certain criteria on how to know, is this requirement now fulfilled or not? Right? A basic requirement for a requirement is that it's testable, and acceptance criteria ensure that. You don't want to have requirements you cannot test. Then we have the parent requirement. Like I said, we have a hierarchy between requirements. And this column helps us just to verify, okay, when we have, let's say, a solution requirement, what is the overlying business requirement in the end? So we don't create requirements which are not matching with our structure or matching with our business need in general. That's very helpful too. Then we also have the creation date, so we have track when we created this requirement and also when we updated it the last time. And lastly, also a comment. So now you kind of understood, I guess, the template that we are using. I want to just mention again, based on your project, it may be pretty good if you add a column or delete one. It's just depending on your organization, but this is a basic good set to start to keeping things going. Okay, now after understanding the columns, let's start with an example. Basically, I have in my daily work as a business analyst in a global operating bank. For this, I prepared a little bit. Here, basically in the first row, you can see the requirement with the ID 0, and that's basically the business need. So for every project, there's at least one business need. There may be multiple too. But what I did here is, following scenario, imagine you're working in a bank and the government is just issuing a new law when a client is canceling a banking relationship, that the bank has to report that to the government. Based on this scenario, you can directly see the business need, right? So there's a new regulation, and if banks are not compliant with this regulation, there may be some fees. So I just put in the value here as $1 million, for example, per year as a fine if you do not match this criteria. Also, the source of this requirement, as I've mentioned, is the government. So the government could give us more information about this business need in the end. Then for the owner, for example, let's say, okay, who is taking care of this whole project? It's just a certain division in our bank, right? It could be a name here. I just put in division head just to be very abstract. The author is you. Basically, you're the only business analyst. Then we have a priority, and let's say that's a top priority for the bank. Also having a due date, so basically end of 2022, so it's a bit time until then. For status and acceptance criteria, right now we can just say to be confirmed because we're just in the beginning of the project. And also, you don't have to fill every column in the beginning. It's something you can refine over time as more is learned. And there is no parent requirement because the business need is the top level of everything. I'm just putting in the creation date of today, and we haven't updated this one. That's basically the start of my business requirement matrix here, right? So let's have a look again. What can we do? So based on the scenario I just explained to you, there may be so many business requirements, really. But I put just a sum here as an example. And the first one is this one here I put in with the ID 1. Let's say the organization needs to send this report once yearly. That's a business requirement, basically also coming from the government. This requirement has to be fulfilled so the whole business need is fulfilled, right? And I just named this with the title report frequency, very short, so we understand what this is about. As an owner, I assigned right now the compliance department, so they have to take care that the report is sent at least or exactly once yearly. I left out the value because it's very hard to measure. The value is probably only important for the business need. Also, priority is top. We cannot go live without this functionality. And also putting in a due date here. So let's go a step further. Another business requirement could be about report details, like the sent client data needs to contain the client name, the tax ID, addresses, and also the assets the client has with the bank. That's a business requirement also coming from the government. For clarifications, we would have to ask the government. As an owner right now, I just put to be defined because maybe it's not clear in the beginning who will take care that these attributes are on the report and the other columns are filled as before too. And always here having the parent ID 0, that's the business need, right? So every business requirement has the parent of the business need because that's the layer above it. When we have a look in the next row, that's the next business requirement. So I will give you again an example for business requirement. And this one is for suspect clients, meaning sent client data with suspect activities have to be marked. So if we have clients with suspect or suspicious activities in the report, this should be marked in some way. That's also a requirement from the government. For now, we just assigned the compliance as the owner. For sure, you can also name a person as the owner. It's up to you. And in the end, probably it's also better to have really a name here. It's also very high of importance. Maybe not top because the government said, okay, until end of 2022, maybe you don't have to need this right now, but after a couple of months. So you have kind of like a day 1 and a day 2 requirement. That's why it's not a top requirement, because we have more time for it. Okay, what else do we have? Another business requirement could be that the reports need to be signed off before sending out. So report sign-off is the requirement. That's also a business requirement. But this time the source is not the government, because the government didn't state they need a sign-off kind of. They just want the report, right? This requirement is coming from the compliance department itself. So you could kind of say it's a stakeholder requirement. When you remember back, I explained there are business requirements and stakeholder requirements. I think it's sometimes very hard to differentiate them. So I just say it's a business requirement, but you have a concrete stakeholder to it. This makes it convenient for me personally to understand. And also the owner is the compliance department, so they have to take care that this is signed, that the report is signed off in the end. And for everything else, we just now put to be confirmed because in this state, it's not clear now. In the next row, we have another business requirement, basically for the report correctness, meaning the report has to include correct client information only. That's probably an obvious requirement, but it's also a valid business requirement. And also maybe let's say the government is stating that, of course, that the information have to be correct. All right, I hope business requirements are now more clear to you. They're really business related. They're not really like in a format that we can directly go to the IT. It's really high level and from the business. I hope that's clear to you. Let me know in the comments if that's clear to you right now. So the next one, as you can see, let me adjust the table a little bit, is now a solution requirement. And as I've mentioned before, we have functional and non-functional requirements and also transition requirements. And right now, this solution requirement I put into the user story format. A user story format is just like that you have a as a role, like naming the role of the user, like compliance officer. I want to, then what the need is, so that what the benefit is. That's the template. And here this user story is, as a compliance officer, I want to review the client details so I can check for red flags. So what is this requirement all about? First, it's a solution requirement, as I've said. Also, it's coming from the compliance department, and also the compliance department has to take care of this. We wrote this requirement. The parent is 3, meaning now that's the first important link that we have. As I've mentioned before, we have a business requirement that suspect clients have to be marked, right? And now this is a solution requirement for this very business requirement. So now we have, as a compliance officer, that's a role in the application. This role needs the privilege to review client details so they can check for red flags or suspicious activities. I hope that makes sense too. Let me know in the comments. Now another solution requirement, again, it's a very compliance heavy example, I hope you don't mind. But this one could be or is, as a compliance officer, I want to be able to mark a client as suspect so that the client gets marked in the report, right? As you can see, also this is linked to ID 3, marking suspicious activities, and both are solution requirements for this one business requirement, right? So there are always multiple requirements underneath a certain top level requirement. Another solution requirement could be, as a compliance officer, I want to sign off the report so that the compliance head can send it out. This is again a solution requirement, this time covering requirement number 4, and that's the report sign-off business requirement. Okay, I think you get the idea that we have many solution requirements for one business requirement, and we have many business requirements for fulfilling the business need. That's the hierarchy, basically with an example. And this one is also an example. Now a different role that the compliance head want to send out the report so that the government receives it before the due date. So this, as you can see in this column M, is now referring to this business requirement report frequency. And the last one I've prepared right now, also a solution requirement, also as the head of compliance. I want to get notified 2 months before due date so I can plan next steps. This again is linked to the report frequency requirement. Alright, I think you get the idea of this Excel. I don't want to say that Microsoft Excel is the best requirements management tool, it definitely is not. But it's certainly okay enough for starting out, for getting started. I think the only issue is really the hierarchy, to kind of like show you the hierarchy. So other tools like maybe Jira would be a lot better. But I think really to get things started, it's still good enough to go ahead with that. Alright, in the beginning, I've mentioned that we have the requirements tab and also the changelog tab. This is key if we use Excel and we want to make our requirements traceable. And believe me, as a business analyst, traceability in making requirements maintainable is key. Let's say, for example, a requirement needs to change. Someone is requesting a change. So let's have a look on requirement number 12. It's saying, as compliance head, I want to get notified 2 months before due date. Let's say the change is that the compliance head and the deputy want to get notified. Okay, that's basically a change. But it's not okay just to change it, we also make it traceable. That's why we use the changelog. Meaning, we just say, okay, requirement number 12 changed on the 11th of July. The change is that now also the deputy should get notified. This change was requested by the compliance head, and the rationale, the reason for this, is that we can ensure deputization. And with this, every single time, we make also our requirements traceable. So we can always have a look on what was changed, why was it changed, when was it changed, and by whom was it requested. And also a trick is really like, let's assume you have this kind of like process every week. You want to update this sheet to the stakeholders. So you're just consolidating all the changes and then publishing every week once.
always saving this file as a new file, so really every change is traceable whenever you want to trace something. That's really key and something very, very beneficial for a business analyst. With that being said, I think you understood the concept of the requirements matrix with Excel. Like I've said, probably you're going to use also different tools, but Excel is also fine for using it. Let me know in the comment section below if this requirements matrix makes sense to you. Also let me know if you have used this before, or how are you using your requirements? How are you structuring them? Let me also know, I'm very interested in that. And also, if you like this video, please press the like button and hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out more of this content here on YouTube. Thanks for watching and take care.
How to prioritize requirements. Have you ever wondered how you easily and efficiently can prioritize requirements against each other? Which requirement is more important and which one is less? This video is the only video you need to watch in order to learn everything you need to know about how to prioritize requirements in only 8 minutes. I will show you the 4 most used techniques in the industry, and in the end I will show you a bonus secret method you won't find in another video, so you can impress your colleagues. Therefore make sure to watch this video until the end. Let's get started right away with technique number 1. So technique number 1 is called in or out. This technique is very simple, and it's just like you have to ask yourself, is the requirement needed for the first release as a bare minimum? Yes or no? These are the 2 paths you could answer the question. If the answer is yes, then this requirement is in, meaning it has a priority. If the answer is no, then the requirement is out of scope, meaning no priority. Let me make an example with the in or out technique. Let's imagine we have the requirement A, B, and C. Now we ask ourselves, is this requirement needed as a bare minimum? If the answer is no, then this requirement is out. If the answer is yes, then it's in. In this case, requirement C would be in and the other 2s would be out. After this easy technique, let me show you technique number 2, the pairwise comparison. Let's imagine again we have requirement A, B, C, and D, and regrouping them in pairs. So requirement A and D is a pair, requirement C and D is another pair. Now we are in this pair comparing which one is more important. Let's say for the first group, the business stakeholders answer that requirement A is more important, and for the second group, requirement D is more important. Now we shuffle these new requirement priorities again. So now the group is requirement A and D, so the winners, and requirement B and C is the second group, so the losers of this comparison before. And here again, the business stakeholders agree that requirement D is the winner and requirement B. So now from this comparison, we can directly say requirement D is the most important one because it's more important than requirement A, more important than requirement C, and as requirement A is more important than B, D automatically is the most important one. The second priority is requirement A, then B, and then C. That's the pairwise comparison. So to bring things a bit more further, there is technique number 3, the importance urgency matrix. On the y-axis, you see the importance of a requirement, and on the x-axis, the urgency. Let's say if you have high importance and high urgency, then this requirement is of high priority, meaning do it now, as soon as possible. If we have high urgency but low importance, then we have medium priority. So it also has to be tackled now, but just not as important as high priority. For the case that we have high importance but low urgency, meaning low priority for now, because we can plan it for later, it's not urgent right now. And if we have low importance, low urgency, this means can we not just basically drop this requirement as it's not important and not urgent at all? So it's also maybe worth checking if this requirement is needed or not. Just to put things again into perspective, here you can see this importance urgency matrix with an example. We just put in our requirements A, B, C, and D, and based on the importance and urgency, they have a point in this coordinate system. For now, requirement D and A would be of high priority, so doing it now. Then we would do requirement C and then requirement B, as we can plan it for later. So now let me jump to technique number 4. It's the Moscow technique. Why Moscow? Basically M, S, C, and W stand for M is must, S is should, C could, and W won't. This just means requirements in the must category are something like, without this requirement we can't go live, it's a must-have. So there's no discussion about it, we need them. S means that we should have this feature because it helps a lot, but it's still not a must-have. Could is just a nice to have, so it's nice to have it, but not a must at all. And W won't means for now we are not planning it, so let's move it for later maybe. That's basically the Moscow technique, how you can prioritize requirements. After showing you all these 4 pretty basic and simple techniques to prioritize requirements, I want to give you a special technique you won't find in another video. This technique is all about the financial analysis. So for this example, let me jump to Microsoft Excel very briefly. So now we are in Excel. Let's assume for column A, we see all the requirements for now, requirement A, B, and C. The first column is the business value. So which value does this requirement have for the business? For example, just to calculate easily, you could say the business value means in a year, so, or in the lifespan of the application. We say in the lifespan of the application, this requirement A would provide $100,000 as value. The next column is the effort. Which effort is behind this requirement? Could be the IT development, also calculating risks because this requirement is maybe not clear, right? So every requirement has not just a value, it also has an effort to generate the value, the costs. Then we have the profit, so the business value minus the effort. So what is the profit of this requirement? And here we can see, alright, requirement B has the most profit, so we should go for requirement B, right? But no, it's not that simple, because now we also have to consider the cost of delay. What do I mean by saying cost of delay? Let's assume we can only pick one requirement, and if you pick one, we cannot pick the other two, and potentially there is a cost for this delay. So for example, there could be penalties that the government is giving us penalties, or we have some contracts with some vendors, and if we don't deliver this requirement, we have cost of delays. So based on this, we can see, okay, requirement A has a cost of 20,000 if we cannot make it, but requirement B only 3,000. So now let's have the profit minus the cost of delay. Meaning, what you can see right now here in the column F, if we choose requirement A, we have a profit of 2,000. If we choose requirement B, we are at par with 0. And even if we would choose only requirement C, we would made a negative profit of 3,000. Meaning, we should go for requirement A because here we can maximize our profits. So now let's use this template for a much more bigger complex setting. So here in this Excel sheet, you can see a lot more requirements, not A, B, C, but A to J. And every one of these has a value, an effort, a profit, and cost of delay. And now let's calculate again the profit minus the cost of delay and order it. And we can see requirement J is the one to go if you only could be able to choose one. Because here we can maximize the value again. Just for an example, if we would go for requirement E, which gives us a value of 100,000, and the effort is anyways negative, so probably that is not a good one to go. There are requirements really which have a more effort than the value, and you should potentially not go for them. But based on cost of delay, it could be again the case to include them in your backlog planning or not. So after understanding the financial analysis, you might think we are done for now. But no, we are not. There's one thing missing I need you to know, and it is dependencies. The financial analysis assumed that all these requirements are independent of each other. And for sometimes that is the case, that's great. Then the financial analysis itself is enough. But now we also want to assume that requirements are dependent on each other. And for this, we need a special technique of the dependency tree or any dependency diagram. So let's just draw in again requirement A, B, C, and D. And let's say requirement A is dependent on requirement B, meaning we can only implement requirement A if requirement B is already implemented. Just illustrating this by this arrow. And this whole thing changes everything. If the financial analysis said requirement A is the one to go, but now we have this dependency with B, we cannot go with requirement A. It's not possible. So we have to go with requirement B instead. That's the game changer here. And I want you to know this too, to really make a holistic prioritization on requirements. And that's everything you need to know. And that's basically how I would recommend you prioritizing requirements based on the financial analysis. If you do want to know more about prioritizing requirements or something like that in general, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye. Do you want to know how to split user stories fast in under 4 minutes? Then make sure to watch this video until the end. Let's get started right away. So let me explain this with an example. Just to illustrate things, I will here capture a user story. Let's say for now you are working in an insurance company and this insurance company has an application for the front employees. So let's assume the user story is, as a user, I want to be able to onboard a client so that I can interact with the client. And also let's assume we have acceptance criteria for this user story. The first one is the user is able to upload and remove documents. User is able to mark the client as suspicious based on the behavior. Compliance members get a notification in case of a suspicious client, automated. The user can manage client data. And the last acceptance criteria, the user is able to perform all these actions in Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge browser. So what we see here right now is a valid user story. We have the description and acceptance criteria. As we see, this user story could be quite complex to implement. And based on the velocity of your development team, you need to split it up. So how can we actually split this user story fast and easy? Let me show you how. The very first thing I would recommend is always having a look at the acceptance criteria. We have right now 6 here, and acceptance criteria in the end represent functional and non-functional requirements. So one thing is we could go and take one split per acceptance criteria. So if we just have a look on the first acceptance criteria, it says the user is able to upload and remove documents. This one is basically an own story itself, so we can split that up very easily. If you think that splitting by acceptance criteria is not good enough, let's have a look on criteria 2 and 3. So the user is able to mark the client as suspicious and that compliance gets a notification whenever that happens. This sounds like a workflow in the application. So let's have a look on such a workflow. Let's assume another business analyst, or even you, has drawn the following diagram. So the onboarding looks like the employee can enter client details, and after this step, the system's checking if we have suspicious behavior. So maybe that's just a drop down or a checkbox. And based on this, there's yes and no. And for each path, we could potentially split the user story. So for the happy path that there's no suspicious behavior, this could be user story 1 to implement. If there is some suspicious behavior, we can create user story 2 and track everything under it. This is splitting by paths in a workflow. This is also valid for many other possibilities. For example, if you have an import-export functionality and you want to export via Word document or via Excel, this again is splitting by paths. You could split by path, so first the Word and then the Excel document. There are a lot of other scenarios you could use splitting by paths. So let's jump back to our user story and the acceptance criteria. Let's have a look on the fifth one. The user can manage client data. First, what does manage mean? In IT, our operations are to create, read, update and delete data. Based on the meaning of manage, we could split this story into operations, like in one story for creating, one for reading, one for updating and one for deleting. So we have also split by operations. And if you have a look on the last acceptance criteria, that the user is able to perform this action in Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge browser, here you can split by the user interface. By the interface, the user is interacting with our system. In this case, the browser. So one user story is for the Google Chrome one, and another one is for the Microsoft Edge. But we could also imagine splitting via the native app and our website, or splitting via iOS and Android. So there are many various scenarios a user can perform these actions via an interface. And there also we can do a split. So let's summarize everything up. How can we split user stories very easily? The first thing is per acceptance criteria. Take this as a basis. Then we can go by paths in a workflow. We can split by operations, create, read, update and delete. And lastly, by the user interfaces, a user interacting with the platform. Alright, if that helps you out, let me know in the comments below. Please smash the like button and take care. See you the next time. Bye bye.
With BPMN, you as a business analyst are able to portray the complex reality into a simple BPMN diagram, hence making reality visible and making it possible for you to see and understand issues in the business process within your company, bottlenecks, chances and risks overall. Let me show with an example what I exactly mean. This BPMN diagram displays the loan request process within a bank. This is just an example for illustration purposes. Let's say there are just 3 roles within the bank: the back office, the compliance and the client advisor. Let's say a client wants to have a loan, hence sends a loan request to the back office. This could be via application, via an app or via a letter. It doesn't matter right now. Let's say the back office employee has to check the documents and asks him or herself, are all documents okay? If that is the case, then the loan request goes to the compliance officer. Here, the compliance officer checks the background of the person, of the loan requester. After this, the client advisor comes into play and assesses the risk of the person who is requesting the loan. And if the client advisor thinks it's worth talking to the client in more detail, then the advisor is contacting the client, setting up a meeting or so, and that's it. So there are some next steps which I just exclude here for demonstration purposes, but let's assume that's the business process. The great thing with BPMN is now we have captured the complex reality, the current state, the as-is state of this business process. If we have a process engine or KPIs around, we could maybe see something like this. Let's say the bank receives 100 requests a day. And let's also assume the process takes on average 0.5 hours for each run, so 30 minutes. And let's assume the employees involved in this process on average make $30 an hour, meaning we have 100 runs every day. Let's take this times 0.5 hours, which one completion takes, which actually mean 50 hours a day. And as we know, $30 per hour is the average salary or hourly rate. Let's multiply this with the 50 hours and we get $1,500. So each day this process takes us $1,500. After we have understood this, we as a business analyst, or you as a business analyst, have the job to really think about, okay, based on this process diagram or this complex reality, what could we change to make the process more efficient in terms of time efficiency or lowering the costs or enhancing quality is also possible. And let's assume this assess risk task of the client advisor is something super manual. So the client advisor has to look through multiple Excel sheets, has to look or check in multiple systems just to get this value out, if it's worth talking to the client or not. And this could be a potential chance for you as a business analyst to optimize the business process. What if you could replace this manual task of assessing the risk with a simple API call? So if you change the system in a way that the client advisor doesn't have to check in these systems or in these Excel sheets, but just maybe has to press one button, an API call to various systems is done, and it returns a value which indicates if the client advisor should talk to this client in more detail or not. And this is the power why BPMN is so important, because it really shows you the reality, and you can manipulate the reality very easily without actually touching the reality itself, because everything is on a model and a diagram on paper first, so you can conceptually change the reality and find out what would be worth doing as a next step. If you also assume that maybe an API call or just a more automated solution can maybe put the time of this process in half, so not 30 minutes, just 15 minutes, this would mean per day we could save $750. So if it's $750 saved per day, let's assume we have 20 business days a month, this would equal $15,000 each month. $15,000 a month equals $180,000 a year. So if we assume that we could really decrease the time of this process in half by having the same amount of runs every day, we could actually save $180K a year each year, right? So you could think of what would it cost to actually establish such a solution so we are able to decrease the time of this process in half. And this could be actually an investment and return on investment actually. Let's assume it costs us maybe $200K to do this. After a year and a half, we actually get our money back, because with these process improvements, we actually save some money. And so we have a great ROI on this case. As a business analyst, you really have the power to thrive internal case studies to actually optimize processes, lower costs, save some time, or actually increase the quality. And that's why BPMN is so important. Have you ever wondered how some people climb the corporate ladder rather fast and some stay stuck for several years? How come that two people who have graduated the same year, have the same age, end in two different places after a couple of years, and one is earning 100K a year while the other one is gaining only 50K a year? The reason for that being is that there is actually a secret strategy behind this, which the successful employees know and the unsuccessful ones don't. Don't worry, let me break it down for you. Like I've said, basically there are just two types of players in the race of the corporate ladder. Type 1 are the unsuccessful players, those who think or believe that success and income is directly correlated with time. So basically there is a salary-time correlation. And there is a different type, the successful ones, who have understood the secret strategy behind the success, and which I'm going to share with you in this video. Before we jump into debunking the strategy, I want to show you a brief quote from Jim Rohn, which basically explains the principle behind the strategy. So listen carefully now.
Here's the big challenge of life. You can have more than you've got because you can become more than you are. That's the challenge.
So think about this for a minute. You can have more than you've got because you can become more than you are. This is a very deep quote, and it totally makes sense. This quote basically states that there is no salary-time correlation or no direct one, but there is a salary-value correlation. The correlation between the salary, what you get paid for, and actually what do you bring to the table, what you have become. Hold on, I get if this sounds too complicated for you, I got your back. Let me explain this one with a visual graphic and with some numbers so it makes more sense to you. So here in this example, I'm just drawing a three-dimensional coordinate system. On the y-axis, you have what you get paid for, your salary. Then on the x-axis, you have the time, which is passing. And then on the z-axis, so it's a three-dimensional coordinate system, you have what you have become. Let's say for now, we are comparing two people, here illustrated in blue and in red. Both people stay in their company for 2 years, right? So they've graduated the same year and they're staying in the company for 2 years and working for 2 years. So blue now is a person who did a good job, did basically what was expected, maybe did a bit more than was expected, but that's it. So this person become a bit more, but red instead in these 2 years have become a lot more. So this person grew a lot more in taking more responsibility, in taking more ownership about tasks, maybe supporting the line manager a bit more, being more cross-functional, so having also other tasks, right? So having more skills now than before. And these are all things how you can become more, right? Going the extra mile. As you can see, red is far more advanced in this journey. So now you might ask yourself, all right, that's cool, but how can you actually capitalize on these gains these persons have made in order to become more? Let me tell you how. There are basically 3 ways to capitalize from this. The very first way is the traditional one. It's basically asking for a raise. So you're talking to your line manager, to your supervisor and say, hey, you have become so much more, like you're taking more responsibility here and there. So you think it's okay to have a raise, right? So that's basically the first alternative. The blue person did that way, asked for a raise. Then there is a second option, not asking for a salary raise, but actually applying on the job market for a different company, for a role where actually you had to become more, right? So basically now you're looking in the market for a role, which is basically what you are right now. And there you have a better leverage to negotiate your salary because you're completely new for this company. But also there is a third option, what you could do in this situation to capitalize on these gains. And let me show you again a quote from Jim Rohn, which explains it perfectly.
See, the major question to ask on the job is not what are you getting? The major question to ask on the job is what are you becoming? See, the big question is not what am I getting paid here? The big question is what am I becoming here?
All right, so what Jim basically said is there is not only salary the way to compensate you, but also the opportunity for growth, right? So basically you could ask internally if the company is offering you some opportunities to really hyper accelerate your way of becoming more faster than any other company out there could do it for you. If that's the case, that's also a very great alternative. Let me show this one also again graphically how it would look like. So instead of 2-year horizon, let's say it's another year, so 3 years. As you have more opportunities to grow, let's say you have the chance to become even more in these 3 years, and you could now then after 3 years capitalize on these gains and get a lot more money on the market because you have become so much more and the company you are in offered you this opportunity to grow faster than any other company could have. This strategy is the reason why we have so many differences in people who really accelerate in their career and the ones who don't.
Hey, in this video I'm going to talk about 3 terrible mistakes you need to avoid as a business analyst. Me personally, I've also made these mistakes and they're really key to understand and to avoid. Furthermore than just telling you these mistakes, I want to give you scenario examples where I've been, so you can also avoid them, and give you also action items you could use in such a scenario to avoid the mistake on your own. And before we start, I want to say, please make sure to watch this video until the end, because especially the third mistake I want to mention is super critical for your career and happens all the time. Let's get started right away. I have a couple of notes here. And the very first mistake I want to mention is not asking although you didn't understand. We all know the scenario. There's something going on, some explanations, and you didn't get it, right? You just didn't get it. And this could be because you're not a long time on the project, not really involved or whatever. And often people, including myself, are shy or too shy to ask. Or they don't want to look stupid in front of the boss, in front of the colleagues, or even in front of the friends, right? And so they're not asking or try to figure it out on their own. The problem with this is, I'm not talking about very trivial things. I'm talking about key concepts. So let's say there's a presentation and you don't get the key concept of this feature or whatever. The problem is later maybe you get asked a couple of other questions, or your boss is asking you to take over something. And if you didn't really get anything about this can get very hard. Okay, so that's the problem with this one. But the reality is, only the person who is not asking is the person who is stupid in the end, right? So you're not stupid in asking questions, you're stupid in not asking them. So now let me give you a couple of examples when I find myself in such a scenario, what I'm saying. So what I'm saying, for example, is, excuse me, but could you rephrase that? I'm not sure if I got that correctly. With this sentence, you're kind of like being very polite, just the other person to rephrase whatever he or she was saying. Another example of what I'm saying is, okay, based on what you just said, what would you suggest me to write down right now? Right, so asking the other person what the note should look like. And so they repeat themselves again, and then you have the chance to understand even better. Or my favorite is, when I don't understand it completely, but just a bit, then I'm saying, am I correct that? Then I'm entering a couple of pieces of information, and the other person who knows it better will complete it then, right? So am I correct that X, Y, Z? And then the person says yes, but, and gives some more details to this. So you understand even more. Another tip here is to avoid this mistake is, if you don't want to ask all the questions to one person, I totally understand. You don't want to block people for 2 hours straight. You can split these things. So let's say share the pain. When I say share the pain, I mean ask 4 colleagues for 30 minutes instead of 1 colleague for 2 hours, right? This makes more sense. You're spreading the pain and no one could ever think you are a fool because you have so many questions. All right, this was mistake number 1. Now let's go to mistake number 2. And this one is avoiding sync points or having only few sync points. So when I say a sync point is, you have a couple of stakeholders which you're updating frequently on anything in the project or on a feature. And if these sync points are too far away from each other, let's say every month 1 sync point, in this 1 month a lot could happen and the feature could evolve drastically, right? So the problem here is your stakeholder has an expectation how the solution will go or the evolvement will go. And if you have so much time in between, things can change drastically. So the expectations of your stakeholder could not be met or could even be in the opposite direction, right? That's the main problem with having too little sync points with your stakeholders. And you want to avoid this, right? I also, as a business analyst in my starting phase, sometimes a lot of time passed when I last updated my line manager or stakeholders. And maybe the solution design drastically changed over time. And I felt a bit of a kind of a weird feeling, like fear to tell the stakeholder the drastic changes, because I knew, oh, they wouldn't expect this. And maybe they would raise a lot of other questions, right? Because I haven't updated them beforehand. And that's the whole concept of this mistake. It's all about managing the expectations. When I say having more sync points, I don't really mean you have to call them or whatever. It also helps just putting stakeholders on CC with your mails, right? If you're updating, just put them on CC so they know what's going on. And also, if you have no update for a feature, saying no update is also an update. If you don't tell the stakeholder that there is no update, they may be expecting progress over time, and that's also an issue. So you want to make sure to update there too. And always, if something is coming up, maybe any issue or any risk, also let your stakeholders know so they can be on the same side like you, managing their expectations. Alright, after clarifying the second mistake, let me now go to the last and the third terrible mistake business analysts do frequently, especially in their beginning year. And this one is never challenging things. Let me explain this one. Sometimes we are going into a project or whatever, and the going in position very often is seen as the right way, the correct way. But who ensures that no one did a mistake before? So let's say another business analyst is analyzing a feature, is writing the requirements, and this business analyst is leaving the company and you are taking over now, and you are basically working on top of the work the other BA did beforehand. And this was exactly the scenario I was in, right? So another BA created a solution design for software, and I just took it as granted or as correct or as already confirmed, approved, whatever. But then I was challenging this solution. I was thinking, okay, this solution is really complex to understand. There's so many things involved, really high effort. And then I was asking, why are we solving it this way and not another way? And the problem here was no one really could answer this question to me very easily. So no one really knew why we are doing the complex way. But in my head, there was an easy way existing. So what I did now is, after challenging this, I went to the developers, talked with them about the solution I had in my mind, and they confirmed me this would also be a valid solution, meaning we could achieve the goal with so much less effort. And after confirming with the developers, I talked to the stakeholders and proposed the other solution design, which is just so much less effort and compared with the current situation. And based on the value this solution provides, stakeholders also decided to take the new solution. So with challenging the status quo, with challenging the previous work, we were able to save a severe amount of money, right? So challenging things is really key. And the mistake to avoid is to not challenge things. These were 3 terrible mistakes I want you to avoid. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
In this video, I'm going to talk about business analyst career paths, and I also want to share some advice with you. On top of this, I want to share the path which I have taken until this date, and also which role I'm pursuing next. As you can see in the title, I'm leaving my current business analyst job for something else. And also I made a previous video on business analyst job interview questions and answers to make you fit for your interviews. So if you're interested in that, I will link the video down below. But other than this, let's get started with the content. So which career paths are out there for business analysts? Let me share you my initial thoughts on this. So basically, I'm assuming you are a business analyst or started as a business analyst at entry level. This could be after graduation, or maybe you are a lateral entrance, so you're just switching careers. Maybe you were before a software developer, or maybe you have been in marketing, whatever, and now you're a business analyst. Which ways are there for you? Mainly based on my observations, if you want to stay in the business analysis domain, you could stay a business analyst, but become one for more complex environments. So let's assume for now you are the business analyst for one product, but you can switch environments, meaning you have multiple products in your domain. Hence, the role is a bit more complex and complicated. After doing this, a potential next step could be becoming a lead business analyst. But also that's basically possible with one product, so you don't have to change the environments first. But after a couple of months and years, you're becoming more senior and you can be a lead business analyst. What does this mean? A lead business analyst actually is above other business analysts, meaning the lead business analyst is organizing the work a bit, is delegating it to other business analysts, is also managing partially projects. That's a lead business analyst. Don't confuse this with a title. So mainly business analysts out there are not called lead business analysts. Like they don't have this job title necessarily, but they can. But the point is, if you're carrying more responsibility, if you're delegating work, if you're having bigger epics, bigger features to manage, then you are a lead business analyst because you have more responsibility. So what is the next step for a lead business analyst? The next step could be becoming a product owner. The reason why the product owner, or why I see the product owner above the lead business analyst, is because the product owner has the final call when it comes to requirements prioritization. So a product owner will always have contact with the business analysts to gather requirements, to sync on these, but the final call is made by the product owner, and hence I see the product owner as more responsible and more above the business analyst. So now if you do not work in an agile methodology and the product owner term is nothing for you, then maybe this could be the equivalent in some way to the project manager. So if you're not product-based but project-based, then the project manager is the role next. The reason for this is the lead business analyst role is mainly having smaller projects to lead, while the project manager is collecting all these smaller projects into one. So there's again more responsibility. A next step above the product owner or project manager could be the product manager or program manager. A product manager, again in the agile and product world, is managing multiple product owners. So being the product owner of product owners, so to speak. If you don't have product owners but project managers, then the program manager is the person above the project manager. This could be a next step. So what's next after product management or program management? One potential could be the head of the department, or let's say head of the IT department, for example, if you're in this product IT world, just as me. Okay, let's say you are thinking business analysis is cool, but to be honest, you don't want to excel more in this domain, you want to change, which is totally fine, and I got you covered. Another domain you could basically switch to is the people coaching business. Let's say you are a business analyst, but you want to go more into people coaching, you could easily become a Scrum Master. The reason why this is easy or very common is that business analyst and Scrum Master both share very good communication skills. And very often, if there is a need for a Scrum Master, then very often one team member gets announced to be the Scrum Master. And it's quite popular to take a business analyst for this role due to the great communication skills and the generalist skills in general. So if this is a path for you, another step could be to become the release train engineer. So basically, if you have scaled agile frameworks where multiple Scrum teams work together, the Scrum Master could be the release train engineer for multiple teams. So that's one step above. Or even if you want to go more further, you could become an agile coach, or you could directly jump from Scrum Master to agile coach. This is also one possible path you could go. But okay, let's say people coaching is still not for you. What is else there? I got you covered again. There is also the quality business, quality assurance. So you can become a quality analyst, or let's say a tester. The great thing is in business analysis, a business analyst very often has contact points to testing, writing test cases. So it's very easy for the business analyst to get into the quality business. After a couple of months and years, you can then mature to a quality manager, who in the end is also a good fit for the product manager or becoming a product owner. Then if you say, okay, what is else there? Maybe something more technical. Then we have also the software development domain to get into. So you can become a software developer. Of course, this might be a bit more tricky because you need some programming skills, but with good courses and stuff like this, you can do the switch. And also here, with maturity, you can become a tech lead and also are fit for the project manager role. Now, there is also a hybrid between software development and quality analysis. This could be the test automation engineer. And also here you have the possibilities to grow in responsibility and join again the big path above. Now, there's one thing missing. When you are an agile coach, you are also able to become a product owner. I have seen this in reality too. Because as an agile coach, you really know a lot about the product owner role. With gaining some skills in business analysis, you are also a great fit. So all this is possible. And now the piece of advice which I want to give you is, whenever you feel like you feel stuck in the role and you think you cannot change, especially as a business analyst, I can tell you, you can change. Seriously. I have seen so many different changes. Like I said, from agile coach to product owner, I have seen quality analysts become a business analyst and also vice versa. So the beauty of being a business analyst or in this domain is really you're so flexible. You have a very great skill set or variety of skill sets, which makes it easy for you to change actually. Sure, sometimes you need some extra courses or education, like for example, getting into software development. But for example, a business analyst is a perfect fit for getting into software development in a low code environment, for example. If you really want to get into coding, okay, do some courses, but you're very flexible and whenever you feel stuck, you can change. That's my piece of advice, which I want to give you. Now, as promised in the beginning, I also want to share the career path I have taken and also what's next for me. I have started after graduating as a business analyst, and while maturing and becoming more senior and becoming a lead business analyst, while that happened, I also took additional responsibility and was a scrum master for my team, so I had a double role. And therefore I had both feet in two different domains. So I was in the business analysis business and also in the people coaching business. And I have done this now for a couple of months and years. Another question for me was, okay, which way do I want to go, or do I want to stick to this hybrid mode? And after considering a couple of things, I came to the conclusion that the very next step that I really want to pursue is the role of the product owner. So I'm planning to stay in the business analysis domain and focus more on the product ownership instead of the people coaching. Although people coaching was a great experience, I just feel like I want to do the product ownership role more. And yeah, in this year, I'm going to change my roles. So I will become a product owner in the next weeks or months. We'll start this new role, and that's my next step. So also let me know, where are you right now and where do you see yourself in the next years as a next step? Comment down below. Do you want to know the most important business analyst interview questions and answers? Then this video is perfect for you. I have worked as a business analyst in the banking industry for a couple of years now, and currently I'm looking for a new role. And in the last couple of weeks, while looking for a new role, I was invited to a couple of interviews with 7 different companies. And from these interviews, I extracted the questions, grouped them, and I want to show you in this video exactly which questions are these companies asking for you when you want to become a business analyst. So let me show the agenda for this video. First, I want to talk about obvious questions. These are the questions you're probably expecting to occur, and these are the ones which seriously, for 100% of my interviews, occurred for each company. So I want to spend just a bit of time for these questions. I want to show you them and tell you my answer, but I don't want to focus on them too much because you will find other videos explaining these questions too. Main part will be the common questions I've heard in these interviews besides the obvious questions. So these will be very important for you. And then also business analysis case study questions, which I have heard in these interviews. So I will share some case studies with you and the questions they have asked about that. Then I want to go about a riddle and a brain teaser question, which I also got asked in these interviews with the 7 different companies. And also in the end, I want to give you some bonus questions I recommend you asking as applicant in order to stand out from the crowd. So let's jump directly to the obvious questions which occur every single time. So probably you already know the questions will always be something like, tell us about yourself. Why did you choose this company? And why do you choose this role? Why do you want to leave your current role or company? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? These questions are super obvious, and you probably know that these would occur. When it's about tell us about yourself, I just want you to basically summarize your CV in 60 to 120 seconds, depending on how much experience you have. Just tell about the most important things, where you came from, and why you are here today. Then why this company? Make your research and try to map your personal values with the values of the company. For example, if you're someone really ambitious, always trying to be the best in the field, and the company is also the best in the field, name this. This is the reason why you want to choose or join this company, because you think your value in being the best aligns with the company's value being the best. Then why this role? Why have you applied for a business analyst role in compliance or in payments, in operations? Is there any specific reason? For example, you have previous experience, or you think this background would be something beneficial to you, so you're super interested in payments, for example. So why this role? Tell the interviewer why this role. Then why do you want to leave your current role? And this is a tricky question because there are some answers which could lead to some problems for you. You probably know for everything that you say, there is always a real reason and there is a good reason. The real reason is actually why you do something, and the good reason is the one which sells better, which sounds good. And I don't want you to lie, but I want you to incentivize or think about to choose your words wisely. So let's say if money was the problem in your current company, don't say, I changed because of more money or more salary. Although this is true, you could also say it differently. You could say, after working a couple of years in this role in the other company, the company is not having a good financial situation, and you and your line manager had some promise, or he gave you some promises in financial regard, and again the company could not meet these promises. So you told your line manager, because of your personal responsibilities, your family, and so on, you gotta move on and find actually a job that pays what you're worth. So it's the same statement. You want more salary, but different words. Then where do you see yourself in 5 years? And also, this is a tricky question. People often say, yeah, I want to be in 2 years here and there, take more leadership, be something like this, right? The problem with this is the interviewer wants to know, okay, are you someone who's trying to change the role pretty quick, meaning after a year or so, they have to hire someone again? And this would be a problem for the interviewer, right? So my answer is always, look, I want to get into this role. I want to prove myself for several years. And after this is done, when I'm established, of course, I would be happy about going more into this direction, more into leadership, or whatever is your personal taste. But make clear you want to stay for the long term and not change roles again after a year. Now let's jump from these obvious questions to the other questions I got asked a lot, but are not that obvious. A common question I got asked in these interviews was, what was the last negative feedback you received from your manager? Here the interviewer wants to know, are you honest? Are you able to reflect and share these details? Be honest about it. For example, if stakeholder management was a problem, tell them your manager told you stakeholder management was a potential to learn something for you, and you actually learned it and did these steps to actually solve this problem. So show what your negative feedback was and show what you did to improve it. Then how would your team members describe you? Also here again, to your team members, you have a different relationship to your boss or to your family or friends. They want to know, how would your team members describe you? Your peers, people who are working closely with you for 8-9 hours a day. Also here, be honest again and try to think, what do they say about you? Do they think you're competent? Do they like to ask you questions because you have good communication skills? Whatever it might be, bring it up and show how your team members describe you. Then the next question was something that really stunned me, amazed me, because it's a very deep question. It is, if you imagine a store where you could buy personality traits, which personality trait would you like to buy? This is a deep question. Think about it for a minute. So every person has different personality traits, right? Someone is more analytical, some is more into communication, whatever it might be. But probably there are traits you would say, hey, I would like to have this trait too, but I personally don't have it as a strength or whatever, right? So think about it deeply. You could say, for example, you would love to actually be more of a motivational speaker, right? So public speaking is a personality skill you would like to master. So this is something you would go more into, right? There's no real right or wrong answer. It just depends on who you are and things you really admire in other people. Then, which role do you usually hold when being part in a team? This is a tricky question. For example, if you're applying for a more leadership business analysis role, but in your spare time you very rarely are the leader in the team, probably things are not matching up. You have to really think about who you really are and what this role is requiring from you. How do you handle different stakeholders, especially difficult ones? This is also a question very common, and my personal answer for this is, I know that there are different stakeholders and I try to categorize them. So there are more introvert and extrovert stakeholders, then stakeholders who are more analytical or task-oriented, and some which are more people-oriented. And if you know this about your stakeholder, you can approach the stakeholder better, more efficient. For example, if it's a more introverted person, usually I don't try to basically just stay in front of the person or call him or her. I try to write a message in Skype or by email to first get things going, if the time is there. And if it's a more extroverted person and also loves small talk and stuff like this, I just grab the person, say, hey, are you down for a coffee to discuss something? And the person finds this sympathetic, right? So it tries to connect with you also. So make sure to understand different stakeholders and handle them differently. So what about difficult stakeholders? What is a difficult one? But I try to define a difficult stakeholder as someone who's not easy to approach, someone who is not that friendly, right? You probably know the stakeholder in your team or in your area. And my answer is, it doesn't matter how difficult someone is, it does not affect my nature of being a kind and competent being. When there's a different stakeholder and he or she is doing his or her thing, I don't let them influence my nature. So I keep calm, I keep patient, I keep being a nice person and asking my questions, whatever it is. I come maybe a bit extra prepared because the stakeholder, like I've said, is more of a difficult one. So if you're extra prepared, they will appreciate it because of their time. And maybe over time, they will be more nice to you, right? This is my approach with difficult stakeholders. Stay true to your nature and be competent, be prepared. Then in the last 2 years, can you tell us about a time where you demonstrated your goal orientation and how did you achieve this goal? With this question, your employer wants to know if you're someone ambitious, if you have achieved something that is above average and they could benefit from an ambitious person. Here you could really tell something. If you made, for example, a weight loss journey, tell about this. If you changed your life in some other regards, tell about this. If you made a career shift, tell about this, right? And also make clear, how did you achieve this goal? So how did you get aware of it? Did you reflect on something? How did you plan achieving the goal? So what were the milestones that you did, the steps that you took, right? Was it a course to get some understanding? And what is your plan there? Share all this and show them that you are able to achieve good results. Then how do you handle risks? In your project, multiple risks will occur and they want to know how you handle them. So for example, as a project manager, there are some risks which are more likely to happen and some which have more effect, have a more severe effect. And my answer to this is, of course, I have to be first aware of risks that might happen, how probable they are of occurring, how bad they are if they are occur. And then I'm thinking about, okay, what can I do to lower the probability of occurring, or what could I do if they occur to lower the impact of the occurrence of the risk, right? So really think about action items, what I could do. And also important is being transparent. So whenever something occurred, problem occurred, be transparent, escalate quickly, and communicate transparently to your stakeholders, to your boss. And that's how I handle risks. How do you stay organized in your workday, or what about time management? So with this question, your employer wants to know, of course, if you're someone who's able to meet deadlines, who's getting stuff done. And my personal answer for this is to stay organized. I have always or everything scheduled in my calendar. For example, in Outlook, when I have tasks, Outlook tasks, I move them into my calendar to really plan them for the day. So I know these tasks get done. Also, when I know I need a couple of hours to do some work, I block this part of my calendar to ensure that I can do my work. Whenever there is a free spot, people can book meetings, but if I'm blocked, I'm blocked. Of course, this is not always possible one-to-one, but it's a good guide to actually block out some time for you to get your work done. Then outside of work, do you educate yourself too? With this question, your employer wants to know if you're someone who's going the extra mile, who is also adding some value to your personal profile outside of work so the company can benefit. I don't want you to lie if it's not the case, but I want to motivate you to actually educate yourself in your spare time. So what I do is I do love reading some educational books or book a Udemy course to stay up to date with technology, gaining some new knowledge. Do always something besides your job. It doesn't have to be seriously every day, but something you're just working on, you can see results on a monthly basis, for example. With this, you're increasing your market value and also your employer sees you as more valuable. Then the next question is quite personal. What would the person who was the closest to you say if you would ask him or her to describe you with only 3 attributes? With this question, they really want to know how other people, especially people who are close to you, describe you and see you. I got asked this question seriously 6 or 7 times, and then I asked the person who I was naming, which 3 attributes would they say? And also what I thought is they would say that I'm an ambitious person, that I'm responsible, and that I'm warm-hearted. These are the 3 attributes this person, which is closest to me, would describe me. And if you would ask this person also about a critique, what would be the answer? Also here they want to know, are you honest? Can you reflect on yourself? Of course, if your critique is something super critical for the role, then probably I would not mention it. I would mention a weakness that is true, but also appropriate for the situation. For example, I'm not a super outgoing person or very socially active, going on a lot of events. This is a critique I hear from this person. What are key competencies you think are relevant for this role as a business analyst? With this question, they want to know, are you actually aware of what you should be good in this role? And I've made a video for this too, so I will link it down below or anywhere above here. But just in brief, I think the key competencies of a good or great business analyst are being able to solve problems, because as an intermediary between business and IT, you have to be able to solve problems. You have to be able to break them down. The second quality is communication. Are you able to communicate effectively across different stakeholders, different levels of background and knowledge? You will have IT stakeholders, you will have business stakeholders, 2 different worlds meet each other, and you have to be able to communicate effectively. And the last quality is comprehension and adaptability. As business analysts, you have to learn things quickly and fast. You will have always different stakeholders on the business side, for example, especially with an IT background, and they will use different words, different languages, and you have to be able to adapt to this. You have to consume this knowledge pretty quick. So these 3 things, or let's see, 3 to 4 things are key competencies, I would say. When there is a deadline and you're about 80% done, is it okay for you to deliver a bit less for the customer when you think it doesn't really matter? This question is also a tricky one. Most people would probably say yes or no, but the right answer, I would say, The ideal answer for this question is it depends. Of course, the default should always be to deliver what was expected or even going the extra mile to deliver more than what was expected. But sometimes during a project you will face a situation that you won't be able to deliver 100% in time. And then it really depends about the risk. What is the risk of delivering less? Is it crucial? Is there a big damage or isn't there a big damage? What is worth more, the quality or maybe the economical aspect of this? Is maybe 90% sufficient instead of 100%? It really depends on the context. There's no yes or no directly. It depends on how severe the things are, the risk if you miss something, and it has to be really seen by situation for situation. What do you like most doing in your role? With this question, your interviewer wants to know, what do you like most, and is this part also part of the role? So for example, I love the most in my role as business analyst to really dig into business process models, analyze them, improve them, understand them. This is a big part of my role and I really love this. So it's a great fit. On the other side, they also want to know, what do you like least doing in your role? With this question, they see, okay, if you like something least doing, but this is a crucial part of your new role, then probably it's not a good fit. But also here, be honest, for example, for me, I really don't like chasing people for answers. So when they need to come back to me, I have to chase them every other day. And this is a part of my role that needs to be done, but I really do not really like. So now if you have worked in different roles in the past, let's say before now applying to this business analyst role, you have been a project manager. What did you learn from them or from the last role that is useful for the role you're applying now? With this question, they also want to see, are you able to transfer skills from a previous role to the new one? For example, if you have been a project manager before, you can say you have learned a lot about project management, about managing stakeholders and meeting deadlines and risk management. So in your new role as business analyst, you will be able to actually manage the feature delivery, to manage your stakeholders effectively and meet tight deadlines. And now the last common question probably at the end of your interview could be, after leaving the meeting, what do you want us to remember about you? So it's really about what is the lasting impression you want to give, what is your signature? And what I love to say is, if you're looking for an ideal candidate who is very ambitious, going the extra mile, but always is looking to the left and right to the team in order to achieve the team's success or even prioritize it over individual success, then you should keep me in mind. This is what I like to say at the end of the meeting to leave a lasting impression. After we have now completed the common questions, let's dive deeper into the business analysis specific case study questions. So the first case study I want to show, or the first question, was how would you check if a system output, which is based on the input, is as expected? Then they showed me the scenario. So basically we have some XML files, we have a system architecture of many systems, and this system architecture basically produces a new XML file. And then I asked how these XML files look like, and they showed them to me, and I understood, all right, so basically the output file, with tracing back the rules, I'm able to map the output value with the input values. So for example, in our output file, we have the name, but in the input file, we have first name and last name. And there is a rule actually that the name of the output file is a concatenation of the first name and last name of the input file. So what I said is, as this is an XML document, the first thing I want to do is it a valid XML document based on a validation with XML schema, for example? If this is the case, I want to check each field of the output file if the rules are applied and can be mapped back to the input file. So for example, when output.name equals John Doe, then input.firstname equals John and input.lastname equals Doe. If this is the case, then this mapping is accurate and I have to go through all other fields too. If a field is not matching this rule, then I know that the output is not as expected and the test case is actually not passing. This is the answer I have given to the interviewer, and the interviewer was satisfied by the answer. Then the next case study was, or the question was, how do you perform a requirements gathering workshop? So this question is quite big, so I have created a dedicated video for this. I will link it down below again or anywhere up here. So make sure to watch it too if you're interested on how to perform a requirements gathering workshop. Then the last case study I want to show is, how should we gather requirements for more than 50 business processes in order to be efficient? So now what's the problem with this? Of course, the usual approach on how to go over that is go each business process one by one and gather requirements and workshops for each process, right? The problem with this is we have 50 processes which are connected with each other, and that's a lot. And also in these processes, probably we'll have repeating features, so things which will occur in many processes. So going process for process with each workshop is not efficient. So I came up with the following. I said, okay, why don't we build a process feature matrix? So for example, here, each column is a process, for example, onboarding a client, and each line basically represents a feature. So for example, the authentication feature. And with the feature process matrix, we can see which feature is part of which process. For example, we will have features which is part of every or almost every process, and we will have features which is only part of one single process. And with this, we can directly see, okay, we can refine these features or define them not in every workshop for the flow, because it's something that happens through all the workflows or processes. So we can define it once. So defining once the search party functionality, defining once the authentication functionality. And this overview here makes it a lot more easy to go over it. So we know which feature is part of which flow, and we can define it just once instead of several times for each flow. After clarifying the case studies, let me tell you something about the brain teaser and the riddle. The brain teaser question I got asked was, can you name 18 characteristics of yourself within 120 seconds? Now you might ask, why is that a brain teaser? Well, imagine you're just having a normal conversation and then the interviewer is asking this one. And of course, the usual reaction would be probably, well, yeah, I can. Something like this. And in my case, I said yes after a couple of seconds of thinking, and my interviewer just took out the clock, the watch, and stopped the time and said, okay, let's go. Tell me 18 characteristics right now. I told him 18 characteristics in less than 120 seconds, so that went well. And I asked, why are you asking this question? And he said he wants to know if I'm someone who's actually thinking before I give a commitment under pressure. That is the idea or the narrative of this question. Are you thinking before you're given a commitment under pressure? Because an interview is something under pressure, right? And 120 seconds also. And they want to know, do you think before you give the commitment of saying yes? I mean, maybe you would say, no, I cannot give you 18, but I can give you 10, something like this. Then the riddle I got asked was the following. I got 9 balls and a balance scale. One ball is heavier than the rest. Find out which ball is heavier with only using the balance scale as a tool, no other tools, no out-of-the-box thinking, just using the scale and the balls. So I'm not a big fan or believer of having directly the best solution. I'm a believer of building a solution and improving it until it's very well working. So I said, okay, for me it's clear, I just have the balls, I have the scale, so I have to weigh the balls. And one way to go over is just saying, hey, I'm weighing 1 against 1 on each side. When the balance scale is at par, meaning both have the same weight, so both are not the heavier one. And if I would go one by one, the maximum amount of tries I would need to find the heavier one is 4. So this is a working solution, but probably the first solution is never the best one. So I said to my interviewer, okay, let's try a different approach. Instead of having a 1-to-1, I'm going to 4-on-4 and having 1 on the bench. So let's say I have 4 balls on each side, and if you assume that one side is heavier, this would mean, okay, here on the right side, one of these 4 balls has to be the heavy one. And now again, for these 4 balls, I have to measure again. So I would take 2 and 2, and again, I would see which side is heavier. And in the end, I have to do, if necessary, again a weigh, and maximum amount of weighs would be 3 tries. So this solution is better than before, but maybe still not the best, so I can try something more. So I said, okay, in this time, I won't separate them 4 and 4. I will make a group of 3. So 3 balls on the bench, 3 on the left side, 3 on the right side. And this time, when the right side is heavier, and I know, okay, out of these 3 balls, 1 is the heavier one. And then I just pick 2 out of these 3 and weigh them against, meaning after 2 tries, I know which ball is the heaviest out of the 9. This is the best solution because just having 1 try max is not feasible. After this riddle was solved, I want to give you a bonus here in this video. Questions I like to ask in order to stand out from other applicants for this role. So make sure to ask these questions to stand out. The first thing I like to ask is, how would you describe the leadership style of a potential line manager? With this, I want to know, what is the culture of the team of my manager? Is it micromanagement? Is it more having more freedom? Micromanagement for me is a no-go, so basically I could directly know if it's something for me or not. Also, it shows to my potential line manager, I think I'm of value and I want to know how you want to lead me. That's a good sign. The next question is, what could be the biggest frustration factor in this role for me? With that, I show my line manager or my hiring manager that I really want to know what is the biggest challenge. And often their answer I use to my advantage. So they're telling me the biggest factor, and then I try to show how I could overcome this factor with my skills. Then, what makes the difference between a good employee and a great one? This question demonstrates that you are probably interested in being a great employee. That's why you want to know the difference. This is symbolizing that you are probably going to be a good one, and they should be interested in great employees, right? Then how would you measure my success in this role? I'm asking this question to first signalize, okay, I want to be successful, so tell me how you would measure it. And also I know how they would measure it and if it does make sense to me too. And now the last question that I like to ask at the very end is there anything else you would like to know or ask again, because maybe my first answer was not clear enough? So giving your interview the chance to ask again if something was unclear, just to put things straight.
In this video, I'm going to share a business analyst interview question I got asked in so many of my job interviews. As per my last videos, I have changed my job, I have switched companies. And while doing so, I had many interviews with different companies. These interviews all had in common this one question. And the question was, how does the person who is the closest to you describe you with 3 words? Now think about this for a minute. Maybe you think that's a very easy question. Why is that so hard, or why is that so special? The thing is, the closest person obviously would give 3 different attributes than your coworker, a friend, or someone else. This interview question has also some more deep meaning. First, the interviewer wants to know, are you honest about this? Because if you give some generic answers, it's probably a lie, because the closest person to you would probably not give that answer. Then the second thing the interviewer is checking is, by asking this question, they find out what are your core values, your core personality traits and core attributes. Because the closest person is probably someone who raised you, is part of your family, who was by your side your whole life probably. So they would know a bit more than just on the surface level. And the interesting thing here for the interviewer is, if they know your core values, they can see, is that a good fit for the team, the environment, and the company itself. So how did I answer this question? So my answer to the interview on the question, how does the closest person to me describe myself with 3 attributes, was determined, kind-hearted, and responsible. And the funny thing is, after I heard these questions 2 or 3 times in an interview, I asked the closest person to me, how would you actually describe myself with 3 attributes? My guess was pretty accurate. These are the 3 attributes also the closest person would describe me, so it was a pretty good guess. Let me know in the comments, how would the closest person to you describe yourself with 3 attributes? 5 books I recommend you reading if you are a business analyst or you want to become one. Let's start right away. Book number 1 I'm recommending is the BABOK, or Business Analysis Body of Knowledge. This book is an abstract framework about business analysis. It teaches you what business analysis is, who is a business analyst, what are the disciplines within business analysis, and all that. So it's a very good starting point. So make sure to read that first, so you get a first glance on what business analysis is, and you always will have a reference point to this discipline. The problem with that book is, alone it wouldn't help. It's just a theory about business analysis. So I have some other books for you which are more hands-on, more practical. And by the way, all the books I'm mentioning are linked down below in the description for you as a link to Amazon. The second book I want to recommend to you is called Creating Requirements for Software Projects by Pamela Patterson. And what I like about this book so much is it has so many practical examples. It's so practical, it's so hands-on, and it's a good addition to the business analysis body of knowledge. For example, how you get requirements clean, what do you do about requirements deletion. All these questions are answered in this book, and that's why it's so valuable. The third book I want to recommend to you is Software Requirements by Carl Wiegers. And what I like about this book so much is it has also a lot of good practices for you as a business analyst to implement in a day-to-day basis. There you will also learn about requirements elicitation, how to do this, what are good techniques for requirements elicitation. So really hands-on practical examples you could benefit from. Also on this channel I've created a video on requirements gathering techniques. I will link this down below for you. But let's go with the next book. Book number 4 I want to recommend to you is a book about Scrum and Agile working in general. These days, as a business analyst, you have to know Agile and Scrum. There's no doubt about this. What I've read is Scrum, a pocket guide. With this book, I've prepared myself for my certifications as a professional Scrum Master and Product Owner at scrum.org. This book teaches you a very good glance on what Scrum is, what Agile working is, and a very good starting point to get into this world. Book number 5 I want to highly recommend to you is called Bulletproof Problem Solving. This book has a lot of knowledge inside how to solve problems in general. A business analyst per definition is a problem solver, and the techniques in this book will help you a lot in general to solve problems at work and also at home. On this channel I've also made some videos about problem solving, where this technique is also part of it. I will link it again down below for you. Let me know if you know these books or have purchased them so we can discuss about them in the comment section or via other chats.